This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto was sent to Elemental Nation by Spirit King as Yamamoto. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
He was going down. He passed through the sky, which was encircled by the deepest gloom. His decision to eradicate every Quincy that afflicted the world of the living, the betrayal of the people he trusted, his execution by being brought down by the very flames he controlled, and memories he had long since forgotten started to cloud his judgment. All recalled why he made the decision he did, which was to ensure the safety of Soul Society and the world of the living. This is how a Shinigami experiences death, then. To be honest, I never imagined that I would die this way. The eldest Shinigami pondered for a moment, a strange feeling he hadn't shown in a long time. A tiny, contented smile appears to cross his face as his tiny brown eyes close. For him, this is the first time in a very long time that he has ever had the opportunity to feel at peace without the numerous burdens he bears. Even though he could feel the wind on his body, he welcomed it wholeheartedly. He was no longer the Shinigami who was more notorious as a demon than anything else, and his legacy was over. His time was over. The next generation would take over his responsibilities and safeguard the Godai 13 as each and every one of them had vowed to do. As he continued to reflect on his actions since his death, he realized that no matter how hard he tried, his body was immobile. However, why had he moved at this time? The man he swore he had killed 1,000 years prior had killed him. It was an error, a terrible error that could cause everything he held dear to deteriorate and perish as a result of that man. For the first time since he had picked up his blade to defend all the souls in the world of the living and Soul Society, he felt himself mentally frown at that. He wished his body and strength were younger. He doubted that he would have been able to eliminate that piece of scum permanently if it had been true. However, he had failed. It was time for the younger generation to take over what he was unable to. He smiled at the boy's strength for the first time since he had known the orange-haired teenager. Even though he had failed at what he had set out to do, he firmly believes that Kurosaki Ichigo won't fail the way he did. With a start, he wondered how many times in his life had those around him referred to him as a failure. An individual who would never be able to do anything similar to those around him. They were merely recollections of his past existence, which he never wished to recall, no matter what he did. The man who was once known as Uzumaki Naruto, however, was unable to forget her face now that he was dead once more. It was the face of the girl he loved and believed to despise him the most. Yet, it was all a lie and a plot to have him killed because he merely posed a threat to their goals. Was it improper of him to want to see her once more? It is nothing more than recollections of a past life that I used to lead. In his mind, Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto told himself to keep his old, wrinkled face emotionless. Just unpleasant memories of the helpless, naive youngster I was once given the opportunity to live. Pain, ignorance, cries of hope from a family. Betrayal, such were the feelings of one blonde-haired, sun-kissed Uzumaki Naruto, a young child who was once too stupid to see what lay ahead. He looked up at the people in front of him with his broken cerulean eyes, the same people he believed cared for him as much as he cared for them. However, it was nothing more than falsehoods and exaggerated stories to get him to comply with their demands. All that was visible in their eyes was the icy hatred this bastard had inflicted upon them. Tsunade's expression was emotionless as she looked down at the battered boy in front of her. Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, for failure of an S-rank mission and the attempted murder of Uchiha Sasuke, you are held responsible. I, Tsunade, 5th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, with the agreement of the clan heads, the village council, and the elders, declare you a traitor of the worst kind. You have brought shame and dishonor upon the entire village. You were ordered to capture Uchiha Sasuke and return him to Konoha. Permission was given to use force if necessary. But instead, you attempted to murder him. Furthermore, remains of the battle at the Valley of the End showed copious remnants of Kyuubi's vile chakra. For failure on your lifetime mission to contain the Kyuubi and protect Konoha, you are condemned. Have you anything to say? When Naruto looked up at his godmother and spat, he had a murderous intentness in his eyes that had never been seen before. His once bright eyes gazed back at the Hokage, the woman he believed to be the most important person in this village, which he had vowed to defend with all his life. I have done nothing wrong to deserve this treatment you have set upon me. I was ordered with several others to bring Sasuke back and I was told to use force when it was necessary. Is this how you repay me for following everything the mission was told to do? Has the village I once loved really fallen this low to punish a ninja that was doing what his Hokage ordered him to do? The slug Sanin waved her hands, seemingly unaffected by the blonde teen's protests, and said, the Jinchuriki had been found guilty of what he has done. He shall be put to death in 3 days' time on March 28th. Take him away. The people below him remained silent, but they didn't really need to because he already knew how they felt about him from his earliest memories. And for the first time in his life, he was not angry about it. His face was expressionless as his arms were stabbed into the wooden floor across from him. He had vowed to himself that he would not permit these traitors to enjoy his suffering, regardless of what happened to his body. He thought bitterly, with little strength I was given, I faithfully severed and protected this village. And you repay me for everything I've done with nothing but suffering and treachery. I should have anticipated this, but I was too damn stupid to see past the obvious. With nothing but complete darkness surrounding him like a black pit, Naruto's cell was chilly, empty, and desolate. Only the chains that sunk into his bloody wrist allowed his lacerated arms to hang awkwardly at his sides. There was a big, empty holding cell. The entrance was barred by a dozen thick steel bars, but the guards were able to enter through a small door. The only indication that he was alive was the icy, emotionless hatred that burned in his eyes as he stood in the center of the cell like a lifeless corpse. His blonde hair was matted with blood and streaked with dirt, concealing his hate-filled eyes. Morino Ibiki and his torture and interrogation team had gone into the cell and started working on him on the first day because the council had insisted that he endure torture. His ribs were broken, one eye was blinded, his left leg was broken and twisted, his skin was burned, and he had more bruises on his body than he wanted to count by the time they left, many hours later. None of that mattered, though, because he saw their faces while they were torturing him, and he was appalled that these jerks were enjoying their misery. However, he did not provide them with the enjoyment they desired. At no point during those hours did he permit any of them to hear him scream as they desired. "You disappoint me, Naruto," a voice that sounded familiar said. The teenager with the blonde hair ignored it, keeping his head down so that his blonde hair obscured his eyes. "I knew you were always going to be a failure, but I never would have thought you were capable of trying to kill your own teammate like that." Other than the ragged breathing of his battered body, the blonde gave the sliver-haired Jonin no response. Hitaki Kakashi ignored him and instead turned to face his former pupil with a disillusioned expression. "Attempted murder of your own teammate. Using the Rasengan, spiraling sphere. A deadly technique only to be used against enemy shinobi? The Ondaime Hokage must be rolling in his grave right now, you using his technique for such an immoral cause. You truly are a failure, Naruto, both as my student and as a shinobi of Konoha," he murmured in a voice filled with sorrow. Once more, Naruto remained silent and ignored the man he had once regarded as a sensei before everything that had happened to him. He heard Kakashi exhale and turned to leave. "As of today, you are no longer a student of mine or a member of Team 7. You are the worst ninja I've ever trained and you should have never become a ninja in the first place." As he gazed at his sensei's retreating form, the teen with the blonde hair said, "You betrayed Maya for a student that never wanted to be a part of this village," his voice full of dark rage. "For that, no matter if I'm to be swallowed by the gates of hell themselves, I will never forgive you no matter what happens to me." In search of at least one understanding soul or sympathetic face that could at least comprehend what he was going through, Naruto looked around the crowd. However, he felt his heart tighten in agony as he glanced around the crowd and saw that not a single soul was there for him. There were none of the genins he considered his comrades. Did they not witness the false accusation and subsequent death of their comrade? Or were they too conceited to choose to spend time with the demon brat when he most needed them? To be honest, he no longer cares about it. No matter how hard he tried, he would never be able to escape this situation. His death was inevitable. He had no choice but to embrace death wholeheartedly. Death gazing up at the dark, rainy sky over Konohagakure no Sato, he smiled to himself in his mind. At the very least, Kami herself might grant me the privilege of resting in peace in the afterlife. That night, there was a storm. As though pleading for the restored integrity of the once proud village of Konohagakure no Sato, the clouds descended upon the village. The sky was illuminated by thunder and cracking lightning. It was gloomy, a manifestation of the emotions that Uzumaki Naruto's heart was experiencing. "Raise your head now, Dobi. Stand tall. After all, even the maggot should pay homage to the hawk that will devour them." Naruto looked up into the face of his former friend, and he showed no emotion at all, so it should be impossible. However, he was directly in front of Hima, the same jerk who had abandoned his lifeless body while making his way to the village of Sound. How did he get here? How on earth could this bastard have entered his cell in this manner? As he gazed at the teenager with the raven hair, he felt rage rising in his chest. He looked at the once loyal Uchiha to Konoha, but he didn't let any of his rage show on his face. Instead, he remained silent and unflappable. He refused to allow the Uchiha to savor the satisfaction of witnessing his suffering. At one point, he had considered them to be brothers, individuals with whom he could identify. However, Uchiha Sasuke never wanted anything to do with him, so it was just a stupid dream. He was simply too young to realize it, clinging to the one hope of having a friend he could relate to. No response. No flash of regretful cries. "I thought you cared about Uchiha Sasuke?" Sasuke asked, leaning in as lightning flashed, illuminating his cell's lone window and casting a spooky shadow over his disdainful face. At that, the blonde teen's eyes narrowed, and he looked at the lone teen in front of him with a suspended expression. Breathing heavily due to his broken ribs, he asked in ragged breaths, "Do you think that question you're asking me is a little improper? You are Uchiha Sasuke, are you not? I have no wish for foolish jeers if that's what you want to accomplish." The blonde beaten teen in front of him was met with a chilly, emotionless stare from the raven-haired teen, who remained silent. He was dressed in a black combat kimono by Uchiha, with armor as dark as night covering the top part of it, instead of the clothes Naruto remembered seeing him wearing. Naruto was repulsed by the eerie blue color of the long katana he carried on his back. This jerk was nothing more than a traitor who would do whatever he wanted, regardless of the harm to those around him. The blonde teen wishes he had the strength to kill the dark-haired teen in front of him in cold blood right now more than anything else. But he detested himself because he was unable to. "I have no need for something like that," Sasuke replied, maintaining the same expressionless expression. Naruto gave a small growl, his eyes filled with hatred as he gazed at the Uchiha in front of him. He laughed at his own taunt. "Then what the hell are you doing here? What the hell do you want with nothing but scum?" He was beginning to lose all concern for his own life because of everything else that people had called him. "I have no use to look at your traitorous face. Leave now before I break from these chains and kill you where you stand." That made Uchiha Sasuke laugh, his voice full of only the most sinister intent. "You really are a fool, aren't you? I should have never allowed myself to think highly of nothing more than Adobe." The blonde, battered teenager said, "That makes two of us, you scum," with nothing but hate in his voice. The final Uchiha stood tall, leaning back slightly, and glanced at his former teammate across the cell. "I have no need to be fighting with you right now," he responded. "Then what the hell are you doing here then?" Naruto growled darkly. "I will not repeat myself, so you better answer my question." Disrespect to someone higher than you no matter what. "Ha Uzumaki Naruto." The teenager with raven hair laughed. "Well, if you really want to know why I came back to this pathetic village is to give you some type of truthful testament before you die." He grumbled, "Even if you're nothing but scum, you at least deserve to know why the reason you're being put to death like a dog." The teenager with the blonde hair let out a roar of rage, feeling his rage building with each word the Uchiha said to him. His broken body was trying to stay upright when a small but deep crater was formed by the intense amount of flames that spontaneously exploded around his body. The teenager with the raven hair looked at the blood with a tiny, blood-thirsty grin on his face as he watched in mild awe. The flames quickly vanished as they encircled Naruto's body, revealing a blonde with a heavy breathing pattern who was giving the Uchiha a vile glare. With his gaze shifting into the renowned Sharingans, Sasuke remarked, "You really are a bit special, aren't you, Naruto?" The two former friends are surrounded by a bright, eerie glow from his crimson eyes, which shine brightly in the dark room. "As I said before, Naruto, when we fought at the Valley of the End, you will never be more special than me no matter what you accomplish in your sorry excuse for life. You will always be a failure, no matter what you do." Despite his best efforts, Naruto's body was not in a condition to attempt to escape his prison. "You fucking bastard. So this was the reason why you came back to this damn village. You wanted nothing else but to look down on me like you're better than me." The blonde-haired teenager yelled with, "I swear no matter how long it takes, I will find and kill you even if it takes me a lifetime, even in death." As he gazed at the blonde in front of him, Sasuke mockingly said, "Strong words, Dobi, but I've already proven that I was stronger than you. Even with the Kyuubi no Yoko seal in your body, you are still no match for my power. Do yourself a favor in your pitiful life and just expect it. You will never get what you want, no matter how hard you would have tried. You bastard, I swear I will kill you." Naruto swore ominously, his eyes filled with rage as he gazed at the teenager with the raven hair. Gazing at the blonde in front of him, Sasuke snorted and folded his arms across his chest. "But you want to know the funny thing? Don't you find it funny that both Kakashi and Tsunade would allow something like this to happen to you? The same Tsunade that kissed you on your forehead and gave you that necklace you're wearing at this very moment?" he said, his crimson eyes suddenly boring with no emotion at all as he stared at the blonde. "I highly doubt that, due to you being executed by the very same village you swore to protect." He grinned ominously. At that, the blonde stirred slightly. Sparks flew from his dazzlingly blue eyes as he said, "How do you know about that? Only Jiraiya, Shizune, and Tsunade should know anything about that." The teen with the raven hair's eyes, which looked down on his teammate with the blonde hair, became colder, almost like ice. Red slits. Why'd I know something like that? It was far too easy when you place a powerful genjutsu on a useless scum of a woman who deserves nothing but death. It was far too easy to be able to accomplish. After I promised that fool Danzo that I would stay in the village, he helped me with placing the genjutsu on your wench of a godmother. He laughed, his voice making a sickly sound. I've wished you would have seen it. Both her and that fool Jiraiya was nothing more than scum that was crying like dogs that they had to condemn you. Maybe Jiraiya may be able to recover from it, but that scum of a Hokage will never be able to reach her former self again. As he made the connection, Naruto trembled with rage. You fucking bastard. He muttered malevolently, it was you? Everything that is happening to me is because of you? With the same somber tone in his voice, Sasuke replied, it seems for the first time in your life, you can be smart. You dead, I will finally be able to do what I've wished without anyone being in my way. But even with all that, it's still very stupid to see you're still in love with that pink-haired wench. He laughed, maybe it's right for you to still love her. Scum, no matter what it is, belongs together no matter who they are. As the boy stood in front of him, Naruto laughed at that, his voice full of hate. The dark-haired raven teen remained silent, only twisting on his heel and bursting into snakes, his soft dark laugher filling the dark cell with nothing but hate. Like Haruno Sakura really cares about me. The only reason she put up with me was to use me like I was nothing more than a tool. Each time you degraded her, she would use me to make herself feel better. It seems you were right, that pink-haired witch would never love you, she would rather die than follow scum around. Maybe I should use her before I truly leave this damn village. As he gazed at the dark sky and the crowded street of Konohagakure no Sato, Naruto held his head high, chin up. If he were to pass away, he would do so with dignity rather than moping like a helpless dog in front of these idiots. A traitor. No. I was the one who was left behind by the majority of those I believed to be at least concerned about me. Naruto opened his eyes and used his chained hands to rub them. He no longer feared the day of his execution, which was today. He had long since abandoned any hope that the village would come to his senses. The only thing he could do was to ensure that he passed away with some semblance of pride still present, regardless of what they thought and did to him. He snorted when he heard footsteps approaching his cell, assuming it was just more villagers or ninja coming to mock him for something he had never done to any of them. A nervous voice said, here he is. Be quick about it, as a guard. Yes, a second voice murmured. His cell door creaked open, and when he looked up, he saw gentle lavender iris eyes staring back at him, trembling with tears that were barely contained. Naruto, Kuna. In order to give the pale-eyed Hyuga a savage glare, the teen with the blonde hair moved into a better standing position. He might as well preserve his dignity and pride and stand tall if he was going to be made fun of once more. What the hell do you want, Hyuga? Have you come here to jeer like the rest of the scum as well? Well then, no need to hold back is all. I remember Kakashi and that bastard Sasuke expressing themselves quite poetically. Hell, even small children had memorable words. Come, see if you can top them. At his stern words, Hinata winced and fell to her knees, crying. Naruto felt a great deal of guilt as her shoulders trembled violently. Maybe he had treated her too badly. Hinata had never really teased him before, after all. He froze as he extended his hand to give her a shoulder pat. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and cast a stern, icy gaze down at the girl with lavender hair. No matter what happened to him now, he had no use for feeling weak and pitying her just because she was crying in front of him. He looked down at her and said, tell me, Hinata, his voice as icy as ice. What was the reason you came here? I've never really spoken to you since the Chunin exams, and that was only twice. The way I see it, you have not one reason to be here. She began, but stopped when a hiccup tore through her feminine body. Naruto. Kuna. She pressed a thin line to her lips and wished the tears would stop. The final words she would say to her beloved would not be, Naruto. Kuna, please forgive me. Naruto was the next to wince. He had never heard those two words before. They were as uncommon as three other words. Your words seem very improper to me, Hinata. What are you trying to tell me? Though he didn't need to allow himself to express emotions, he couldn't allow himself to return to the childlike boy he was who wished everyone would recognize him. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have been there for you. I should have stopped them somehow. I should have. Hinata said, her tears running again despite her best attempts to stop them, leaving a gleaming river down her pallid cheeks. With each word she spoke, Naruto felt his entire body becoming colder and colder. The way she was right now, the way her body was shaking for someone like him, it was so clear to him it was foolish not to see it. Hinata, for your sake of not getting hurt, you bet not be trying to tell me what I think you're trying to say. Again the lavender girl flinched, Her face choked with nothing but tears as she willed herself with all her strength to look the blood-haired shinobi in the eyes. Naruto. Kuna for a long time now, Ivy. She stopped again, then scrunching up her face, blurted out, I love you Naruto. They dropped her face into her hands and wept. Naruto was shocked, but it didn't show on his face as he looked at the girl crumbled on the ground inches away from him. It was clear to see, she had always been the one that was too scared to talk to him, the one that had always looked at him from afar, even when all he wanted was someone to talk to. His mind began to rear back in a good state of mind, and his cold anger began to boil over. This damn woman kneeling before him could not be doing this right now, a mere hours away from his execution. Tell me, why would you love someone like me? The blonde-haired teen asked, looking at the pale-eyed girl below him. I'm the village parish. No one likes me, and I'm even being killed just to prove a point. Why me of all people? The blue-eyed Jinchuriki frowned darkly. Because Hinata strengthened herself up and grabbed onto Naruto's hand and leaned in to give him a chaste kiss on the lips, surprising herself with her own boldness. Maybe it was because she had nothing to lose. You're always so strong. You never let anything depress you. You lift me up when I'm down. You are my light when I'm left in nothing but darkness. You are my inspiration and I love you. And no matter if you die today, I'll always remember you. The blonde-haired shinobi stared at the girl before him for a moment, trying to find anything that would make him doubt what she was saying, but he could not find a single emotion of dispassion in her eyes. He smirked a bit, his head falling towards the ground and hung lifelessly. Get out now, he spoke, not daring to look her in the eyes. Just leave now Hinata, before I do something I'm going to regret for the rest of my few hours I've have to live. Hinata chalked up tears. She could feel her heart breaking the more she stood here. She was afraid of this happen, the man she loved more than anything breaking from what he was due to what they had done to him. Please Naruto. Kuna. She chalk out, everything I've done is full of regret. I wish I would have talked to you or helped you through the loneliness that you've lived with for so long. A chuckle passed through his lips. He raised his head and tilted it to the side, his blonde lock falling over his eyes to give him an even darker look. You love me? He said, his voice dark. Then tell me Hinata, from what I'm seeing. You have loved me for years even before I've talked to you at the Chunin exams. If you loved me and knew what I was going through, why did you at least try to talk to me? Would you have been so much strength to talk to me? Hinata flinched at his harsh words, feeling her entire body getting weaker with every minute that passed. What he was saying was right, as she should have been stronger, she should have helped him a long time ago when he needed it the most. But she didn't, because she allows herself to be too weak to finally do something for her, to grab something she wanted for a long time now. You're right, everything that you have said is true. I'm so sorry Naruto. Kuna, if only I was stronger to at least talk to you. Even scoffed, not having a shred of love or kindness within his body. I will not say it again Hinata. He glared at her, allowing his anger to take control over everything he was feeling. As you said, you were too weak to grab what you wanted. If you truly wanted to help me, and if you truly loved me like you said, then you would have talked to me. Even the weak have the courage to talk to the person they care about, but you were too scared of what the star was going to give you, so you did not reach for it. Hinata shook her head, trying desperately to deny everything that was being said to her. That isn't true I've... Leave. He growled out, his eyes narrowing into cold crimson slits. This village and you mean nothing to me. I will be dead in a couple of hours, but I will die with pride. I will not allow your selfish need to tell me you love me to weight me down. Leave now Hyuga Hinata, and never allow yourself to think about me again. I was forsaken by all, my life tossed aside like used up flames, by the one person I thought of as a brother. How foolish, how naive of me to ever think he was anything to me other than an enemy that was building up to strike me down. You're nothing but scum for saying something like that, Baka. A voice hissed, filled with a small amount of fury, but what confused him the most was that he could feel sadness in the air as well. From where he was standing, Naruto cast his gaze upward, and saw a mop of pink hair before him. For some odd reason, he felt himself laughed at the girl that was standing before him. Out of everyone he thought would want to see him, he never would have thought she would come to see him. The only woman he knew was still loyal to Uchiha Sasuke. No matter what that bastard did to everyone around him, he knew she would never see him in the wrong. Disgusting, there was no other words to call her but that. They must want me to suffer greatly, don't they? He asked himself, not even bothering to look his pink-haired bitch of a teammate in the face. So, to make this quick, what do you want with me, Haruno? It was small, but he grinned darkly when he saw her flinched. The Team 7 member with the pink hair remarked, she loved you more than anything you know. What was the reason you had to say words as harsh as that to someone who cared for you? That rich coming from a bitch like you, replied the blonde shinobi, You care for no one, not even your own fucking parents. The only person you care about is that bastard Sasuke. Not a single person is on your mind other than him. Sakura took a small step back, her face tensing in agony at what she had just heard. She was nothing more than scum in the eyes of everyone and everything around her, and everything her blonde teammate was saying was accurate. Why? What was the rationale behind her previous treatment of him? Even though Sasuke didn't even give her the time of day, he had been nothing but nice to her. She deserved nothing more than to fade away like a flame sneered at. She was scum, a piece of dirt. She took a step forward and gave Naruto a feeble expression. Her voice attempted to sound emotionless as she said, "Yes, you are correct, Naruto. If you're scum for telling Hinata something like that, then I'm more so than you. I deserve nothing more than to be dragged down and killed, to be tossed away like a dark soul." Her words caused Naruto to growl, furious that she would even say such a thing. "What the fuck are you trying to tell me?" He suddenly cracked up. "Are you trying to say you're feeling sorry for what you've brought? Or are you trying to make amends for that bastard Sasuke?" He darkly chuckled. How typical of his loyal bitch to come here to beg for his forgiveness. Sakura shook her head, her eyes starting to well up with tears. The girl with the pink hair was trying very hard not to cry, but it was hurting her more than she wanted to see her teammate in this state. He had always served as a kind of beacon for Team 7, but now that beacon had vanished, leaving behind only a hateful man in front of her. Nothing in her body was going to change her mind about the fact that he was entirely her fault. Perhaps none of this would have occurred if she had simply been stronger and had never pleaded with him to return Sasuke to the Leaf Village. "Blame me." With a puzzled expression on his face, the teen with the blonde hair looked up at the girl with the pink hair. The chains that bound him rattled like glass as he jerked forward, saying, "What the hell are you talking about? Blame you for what? Blame you for this? No, I've planned myself forever allow myself to trust any of you damn bastards." Sakura moved forward, but took a step back when she heard the blonde in front of her growl angrily and hatefully at her. Knowing that everything he did to her would be something she deserved more than anyone, she welcomed it all with open arms. She sobbed a little but kept it in as she looked her teammate in the eyes. "Blame me, Naruto. If it weren't for me, if I was stronger than I am now, then I would have never allowed you to go on that mission. If I wasn't so obsessed with Sasuke, then you wouldn't have to suffer like this. If I would have just seen the sign of Sasuke before all this, then you wouldn't have to suffer. You wouldn't have to go through something like this." Naruto felt his rage starting to flare up and shifted, taking a step back. He gave her a dark sneer and said, "Go now, you damn scum." He scoffed, his crimson red eyes glaring at the pink-haired girl with nothing but hate in them. "You're right, everything you just said was right on the mark. Maybe if you would have seen what that bastard Uchiha was, then maybe none of this would be happening, but you did because you were so fucking stupid not to see what was right in your face. But you couldn't because you were so in love with him as you say," he said. Sakura walked closer to him after nodding. "You're right, but shift all your hate towards me," she replied. "The others, none of them deserve it. Me and Sasuke, we were the ones that did this to you." The blonde shinobi exclaimed, "Leave now, Haruno," as he felt his anger nearly erupt. The more she stood in front of him, the more he lost it, despite his best efforts to keep it under control. "Leave now before I kill you where you stand." She remained where she was, however, with the same expression on her face. A strong shockwave struck her body, lifting her up and slamming into the wall behind her, but she was interrupted. A bar of the cell stabbed into her right arm, causing her to scream in excruciating pain. A moment later, a piece of metal struck her left eye, causing her to scream in agony as well. Her pain, the one thing she wanted to feel for what she had done, continued. After everything he had experienced, Naruto watched with pleasure as his insanity started to wane. "I wonder how it feels, Haruno Sakura," he grumbled, "asking for forgiveness from me when you know you don't deserve any of it. If you can stand, leave now before I finish what I started." Sakura shifted on the ground where she collapsed and fought to remove the pipe from her arm while experiencing pain she had never experienced in her life. She was unable to see with her left eye, which was already evident due to the extent of the damage. She screamed, gritting her teeth, and used all her strength to pull the pipe out of her right arm. Despite feeling weak, she mustered her remaining strength and removed the shard from her eyes. The girl with pink hair struggled to get up from where she was and said, "Iya, everything I deserve, every pain you want to inflict on me. I had every chance to be able to talk to you, be able to help you when no one else would. But I was too blind and stupid to see what I was doing, and for that, Naruto, I am truly sorry." The blonde adolescent spit out, "I don't want your fucking pity," with hatred. "Just do yourself a favor and leave before you die." The pink-haired girl ignored him and simply approached him as slowly as she could, unconcerned with the amount of blood she was losing. Naruto stared at the pink-haired girl in front of him, feeling the rage in his body start to subside. Since he never imagined Sakura would do this, he knew something was amiss. Why, then? Why was she putting herself in danger to bear his suffering? Sakura said, "You're going to die today," as she leaned as close to him as she could. The teenager with the blonde hair remained motionless, staring down at the girl on his body with a perplexed expression. She chuckled a little, her face wet as she said, "But, even if you were gone and forgotten this day, I will not allow myself to forget what you did for me. Even when he couldn't, you risked your life to save me from Gaara when you had no reason to do so. I'm really empathetic, aren't I? It took me this long to say thank you to the person that saved my life." He had never seen Sakura so careless. She was severely injured, and it was possible that her left eye would never be able to see the light of day again. He knew that something was seriously wrong with this girl. She had the strength and bravery to express her feelings to him about the way he was. Despite the threats he threw at her and the injuries he caused, she was honest with him, sharing only the most honest things that were happening in her heart. As he gazed into her single emerald green eye, he started to feel a little remorse as his rage started to lose control over him once more. He muttered, "Sakura-chan," maintaining his focus solely on her eyes. "Just leave, you suffered enough. I know what you're trying to say, you don't need to say another damn word." She raised her hand to his tender, careless face and asked, "Do you? From the expression on your face, you might think I'm trying to say that I love you, right?" She raised her eyebrows. She stepped back and looked at him with the same faint smile on her face. "As you said before, I'm nothing but scum. A person who does not deserve anything more than pain. Right now, I know nothing of what love is for another person, and I don't deserve it after what I've done to you. I know you will never forgive me, so I'll never ask you to give it to me." She briefly glanced up to see the first Hokage's reaction after wrapping her fingers around his necklace, but the blonde shinobi remained motionless. She could see a hint of bewilderment in his eyes despite his expression of indifference. She gently removed the necklace from around his neck and put it around her own. She continued to smile as she turned her limb in the direction of the cell door. Before leaving, she gave him a brief, melancholy smile while most of her face was covered in tears. Before turning back to face the teen with the blonde hair, she glanced at the necklace around her neck. With nothing but intense sadness in her voice, she said, "I'll keep this for you. This will allow me to remember my sin. All this pain I caused you, this will make me remember everything I did." She turns around and walks away after saying, "It may not mean anything to you, but I will get stronger, and what Sasuke did to you, he will pay." Naruto is left in a state of shock and confusion. She had left him stunned and bewildered for the first time since he had fallen in love with her. When they came to see him, she did something that no one else had done. She tried to express to him how she was feeling at the time by speaking honestly. Uzumaki Naruto cried for the first time in a long time, and not just for himself, but also for the 2 lives he might have destroyed more than anything else. "I don't care about the memories of a dead man because I was just a useless waste of space that had once served a useful purpose." The elderly Shinigami reflected sourly, somewhat taken aback that he was still capable of feeling anything after death. He had lived a wonderful life before joining Soul Society and had done everything in his power to defend his house, so he shouldn't be feeling this way. He would finally be able to rest in peace after 3,000 years of fighting, so it was time for him to go. Apparently wise beyond his years of service, an enteral voice said, "I'm sorry, Shigekuni Yamamoto, but your time is not yet to come." Upon opening his eyes, the dark brown eyes of the former Sotecho of the Gode 13 took on a reddish tint as he surveyed his surroundings. His body appears to be still floating in the open area in front of him for some strange reason. However, for some strange reason, he refrained from scowling in rage as if it were normal, and then his head hit water. As if he were flying through the air, he kept falling. He started to slow as he got closer to the quickly approaching ground. He straightened his body on his own initiative. Despite letting it show on his creased face, Genryusai Yamamoto took a deep breath and was shocked that he could breathe at all. He frowned as he gazed down at his body, feeling strange about being sliced in two, just as he had been before that jerk you watched destroyed his body. The Sotecho frowned at that, feeling remorse at himself for not killing that man when he had the opportunity a millennium earlier. For the time being, though, he could only hope that Kurosaki Ichigo had sufficient authority to put an end to what he had begun. For a moment, he pushed those thoughts from his mind and looked around, seeing nothing but darkness for miles. He looked down and saw that he was standing on an odd black surface. He stepped forward and tensed as the darkness on the strange platform he stood on was abruptly broken by thousands of white doves, revealing a circular platform made of stained glass. Above him he sensed a strange sensation, a familiar Ryutsu feel. His right eye opened in surprise as he looked up and saw a large golden phoenix with red flames for eyes. For some reason, he was unable to discern how the phoenix above him could have been the same as the Sokyoku's. In the distance, a flame appears to flicker to life without any prior notice. Ryujin Jaka, the blade that had been at his side for as long as he could remember, was the target of the old man's tense right hand. He chuckled abruptly, realizing the irony of what he was thinking at the time. The location he was at now had to be hell itself, and nothing else. How appropriate that he be placed here of all people. He wouldn't let anything kill him without a fight if it was the truth. He intended to demonstrate to them why he was the strongest Shinigami to have ever entered Soul Society. The same voice, full of wisdom, said, "It never amazes me, but you have always been one to be quick in your decisions. Haven't you, Shigekuni?" Yamamoto stiffens, staring at the silvery white flame that appears to be glowing even more intensely than before. He straightened up and stared at the flame in front of him, his eyes narrowing into slits. With his right hand firmly grasping Ryujin Jaka's hilt, Yamamoto commanded, "Who are you? If you wish to speak to me, then show yourself now." The old Shinigami was more irritated than he would have liked when the voice laughed. "I see, the last time we have talked was over 2,000 years ago, just before you were able to grasp the power of your Zanpakuto." The voice laughed, "But I must say, I'm a bit sad that you do not remember me, old friend." Yamamoto looks at the flames in front of him, his eyes widening in shock as his whole body tenses up. It might be what he was thinking. This could not possibly be the Spirit King of everything. If it was him, why would he call him here? His service was lengthy, and he trained 2 students who were capable of caring for the Gote more effectively than he ever could. So why was he called before him? He let his body drop to one knee and shook his head. With his eyes fixed on the silvery white flame in front of him, the elderly Shinigami said, "I apologize for my rudeness. I meant no disrespect whatsoever." With another little laugh, the Spirit King's voice said, "There is no need for that, my friend. For as long as I can remember, my friend, I have watched you serve the Gote 13 with everything you have. It is now time for me to do something for you. I just hope you are ready for it, my friend." "All set for what?" Yamamoto remarked to himself, staring at the sliver white flame in the darkness in front of him with his tiny dark brown eyes narrowed into slits. "What does something like that mean? What else could I have been prepared for besides enteral slumber, since I'm already dead?" The flame simply flickered brighter before a burst of intense light suddenly engulfed the entire area around him. The Spirit King in front of him remained silent. The elderly, strong Shinigami frowns a little at this, his eyes adjusting to the light as if it were a tiny bug that would not go away. A dark forest that appeared to be very familiar to the elderly Shinigami was revealed a few seconds after the bright light faded. His eyes popped open in astonishment as he looked around and saw the forest where his ninja life had begun. Despite his efforts to hide it, he was becoming irate and recalling a period of time when he was a mere child begging for too much, something that no one in that fucking village wanted to give him. In a way, he detested this forest. The Spirit King seemed to want to show it to him, and he recognized it right away. After all, he started his shinobi career in this forest, and his life has been nothing but regret and a lot of mistakes. He received his headband from his first instructor, Uruka, in the same forest where he had defeated a startled Mizuki. But even as he watched, the scene dissolved and gradually reformed into a bloody, familiar scene of which he was proud of, the same scene in which his first 13 soldiers engaged the Quinces in combat. The scene, which featured bloody bodies of people dressed in familiar Vandenreich clothing, was nothing more than a nightmare scene. Regardless of how hard one tried to suppress those emotions, he saw it as a scene of unadulterated beauty, one that a warrior of the blade would be proud to be a part of. However, he was too old to even attempt such a stupid thing, so he wasn't going to hide any of his feelings. This scene only served to remind him of why he had decided to use his Ryujin Jaka and Zanpakuto to burn anything that stood in his way in order to protect the souls that were unable to defend themselves. It wasn't that he enjoyed killing. He turned to look at the 13 figures that were moving like death gods across the blood-stained field as his feet clenched onto the ground. He is extremely proud. He had referred to these 12 men and women as his brothers and sisters, his comrades in arms, who would sacrifice their lives to defend what they believed to be right, 1,000 years ago, before the Gote 13 had been formed. Each and every one of them transformed into murderous devils in order to ensure that others who were unable to fight could live in peace. In those moments, he could honestly say that he felt more alive than anything else in the world, and a tiny smile appeared on his face. According to Shinobi, the greatest feeling a samurai or warrior of the blade could experience was the pride of upholding one's honor. They could never hope to experience anything like this. He had promised himself that he would never abandon the ways of the blade when he had abandoned himself as a shinobi of Konoha, of Uzumaki Naruto. "Having fun, my old friend? Taking a walk down memory lane, are you?" The elderly Shinigami turned slightly to face a silvery white figure composed entirely of flames. like two elderly men recalling bygone eras. The Spirit King's flame-like figure paused on his side and watched the scene in front of him. This was one of the best scenes of which each of them could be proud, despite the fact that it had been the darkest in Soul Society's history. Genryu Yamamoto said, "I was proud, you know," in a solemn but incredibly proud voice. "Serving under you gave me a chance to be something greater, far greater than I've ever been when I was alive as a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. I have some things I regret even in that life as a shinigami, but I was far happier than I could ever have been if I lived in the shinobi nations." The Spirit King's expression remains solemn yet arrogant as he turns slightly to face the elderly shinigami. He nodded slightly and pointed to the 12 figures standing with a younger, more powerful Yamamoto. "I know Shigekuni, and I could not have asked for a better soldier to protect the place I called my own." He held up his hand slightly, snapping his fingers, and a figure appeared in front of the two elderly warriors. "Not just you either, those 12 you order has made me proud everything I see this scene of what all of you sought to protect." As Yamamoto stared at the person in front of him, his eyes narrowed into tight slits and he felt a powerful wave of disgust wash over him. It was him, but not the him he wished to recall. The him in front of him was dressed in the attire from the long, forgotten dream. He had 3 whisker marks etched on either side of his face, bright, sun-kissed blonde hair, and cerulean blue eyes. But instead of his usual repulsive jumpsuit that shouted, "Kill me," from a great distance, he was wearing a white kimono embroidered with the fire symbol. His hand held a particular triangular hat, the Hokage's hat that he remembered Sarutobi wearing, but there was no headband on his forehead. Yamamoto stiffened slightly and put a hand to his head, flinching slightly. Waving his hand to break the image away like flickering lights, the Spirit King frowns. "I'm sorry, my old friend, even though it angers you to show you something like that, it was needed to be done." Yamamoto shifted his face back into the hard expression he usually wears, giving the kami of all existence a brief but tiny glare. With a hint of rage in his voice, he turned to face the Spirit King and asked, "And why is that, my king? What could be the reason for showing me this? I have long been in service to you. I have done everything you have asked of me. I have lived my life to the fullest extent than what I could ever hope for when I was alive as a shinobi of Konoha. What is it that you truly need of me to do?" The Spirit King grinned as he gazed at the elderly man in front of him, much like a parent would gaze at his own son. When he was alive as Uzumaki Naruto, Genryu Shigekuni Yamamoto always did everything in his power to become the most powerful shinigami of his era, pushing past the boundaries of everything that had previously limited him. He had grown out of the naive boy he had been and was now a man who would stop at nothing to ensure the safety of Soul Society and the world of the living. His tenure as the Sotecho of the entire was over, and he had fulfilled all of his obligations, but his legacy would live on forever. He grinned a little as he imagined the tall, orange-haired teen who would carry on his legacy. With a clam gaze in his eyes, the king explained, "I am your king, and a king must know all of his subjects. This, as of what you have just seen, was the form of one of your deepest desires. You, in the Hokage's robes, ruling over a village that has accepted you for who you are." The elderly shinigami sighed. "Yes, you are corrected about that, my king. That was the form of which I always wanted when I was nothing more than a child. But I have no desire to become the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. I have let that desire go. There is nothing in my heart that would even think to want something like that." With a tone of humor, the Ryo, Spirit King, said, as straight to the point as always, "I see." He wouldn't let himself feel sorry for one of his best friends and warriors, even if he wanted to. If he did, he would be displaying the greatest disrespect possible to a soldier who has been loyal to him for a long time. "You are known as the most powerful shinigami to walk over Soul Society. Fear only next to me. Even now, even after years after your death towards you watch, you are still well respected and feared towards others." With a grim expression on his face, the powerful shinigami's head turned slightly to face the Spirit King. He asked, somewhat perplexed by what was being said to him, "What do you mean years, my king? How long have I been dead?" "You've been dead for 3 years, and in those years you've been in a deep peaceful sleep that you deserve, and far more than even that," the Ryo said with a slight smile. Then he frowned, a dark expression taking over his face. "I apologize, my friend. It was not my intention to have Uzumaki Naruto leave the world so soon. There was so much in store for you. I had so many plans, you had so much potential. I underestimated the magnitude of the prejudice humans can put through." A faint smile appeared on Yamamoto's face as he gave a slight shake of his head. "There is no need for you to apologize to me, my king. You did what you had to. Your decisions are that of fate. If it was my destiny to die that day, then I have nothing to be angered about. My life as a shinigami is something I will never forget or regret. For the first time in my life since I was Uzumaki Naruto, I was content." The Spirit King nodded, his face still displaying a slight frown. Even so, my friend, having your life in like that was something I never wanted to put you through. He nodded. My words before were much improper and might be confusing to you. That day, on March 28th, you were supposed to die, but never like that. Yamamoto's dark expression widened as he narrowed his eyes and gazed at his king. He inquired, what do you mean by that? The Spirit King's voice darkened as he answered, as I said, you were never supposed to die like you were that day, Yamamoto. The scene before them changed to a man wearing a dark cloak with red clouds on it, and a spiral dark orange mask covered his face as he flared his arm in front of his body. It was this man, this scum that changed everything I had planned for you in the world of shinobi. At first, Yamamoto remained silent and simply gazed at the figure in front of him with a neutral expression. To him, the figure in front of him didn't appear particularly noteworthy. Rather, he was a feeble idiot who appeared to enjoy concealing his face with a mask. To me, he looks extremely weak. He responded in a brief manner, which was out of character for him, but looks can be deceiving. Yes, this was the man who changed your life from the moment you were born, the Spirit King said with a nod. Since my birth? Are you saying he's the reason why my parents weren't there for me during this time? Yamamoto asked, his eyes narrowing even more. The Spirit King chuckled and grinned slightly when he said, but I should never underestimate someone of your character, my friend. In all honesty, I thought you would have hated your parents for leaving you along. Yes, my king, but what does this man have to do with my parents? The elderly, strong Shinigami smirked at that. A dark expression spread across the Spirit King's face as he gave a slight snarl. His arm flared once more, and Yamamoto's eyes narrowed in rage as he gazed at the figure in front of him. I'm sorry, my friend, but during the time of your life as Uzumaki Naruto, I was nothing more than a fool who put too much on a child of all things. From what he remembered, he appeared to be much older than he actually was, but it was Uchiha Sasuke, the bastard who had killed him all those years ago. The person in front of him appeared to be an adult, too close to Uchiha Sasuke's likeness for the elderly Shinigami to enjoy. The majority of his right eyes were hidden by his waist. Length black raven hair, which was framed by shoulder. Length bangs on the side of his face. There were more noticeable wrinkles that had formed beneath his eyes. He wore the Senju clan's traditional armor over his clothing. It was made of many metal plates that were shaped into several protective guards along his body, specifically on his thighs, shoulders, chest, and waist. He wore an indigo long-sleeved shirt, boots, and gloves under the armor, along with Konoha's indigo forehead protector. He had an orange fan on his back with a long black chain running up it. He also had white bandages wrapped around the handle of his back, which had a black Mitsudomoi pattern in both upper corners that was bright red in color. With the same tone, Yamamoto asked, why are you showing me this? Because of these two, or more in precise, that of Uchiha Madara, your life would never had to be ripped from your parents. The Spirit King responded, they wanted the Kyuubi no Yoko which was sealed in your mother during the time. The only reason they did not obtain it, was because of the noble sacrifice your father, Namikaze Minato took to make sure you were still able to live. Yamamoto's tone softened as he said, so, what I thought was true. My father really was a great man, along with my mother as well. You do not hate them? The old Shinigami gave a mental snort at that. And why should I? His father must have been pressured to make such a choice because no father would ever want to place such a burden on his child. He was proud of his father, the Yondaime Hokage, who does his best to defend his home village, despite the fact that he didn't know much about him. He also knew from his current emotions that his mother did everything in her power to keep him safe, regardless of the suffering she endured. They did what they had to my kind, and I will not hate them for something that even I might have done to save my home. The Spirit King nodded, but a frown was beginning to return to his face. Yes, you are correct, my friend. But, do you wish to pay them back for what they have done? Do you wish to exact your revenge on them for taking away the chance you had to live with your parents? Standing erect and glancing at the two figures in front of them, Yamamoto shook his head at that. Revenge is sometimes petty, and even if Uchiha Sasuke took it too far, him is a reason to want to exact his revenge on a man that took everything away from him. He breathed deeply, I do not wish to become like that man, no boy who wants to kill everyone that stands in his way. You are wise beyond your years, Shigekuni. With a long, exhausted sigh, he closed his eyes and said, I have lived a full life as Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. I had a purpose when I was serving as Sotecho of the Gode 13. I fought with honor and pride. I have no wish to return to Konohagakure no Sato. All I wish to do is sleep, nothing else. The Spirit King let out a long sigh and partially closed his eyes. The man by his side was telling the truth. No one should ever regret his life as a Shinigami. He never gave up on anything that was in front of him during any of his battles. He was relieved that Genryusai had been able to live life to the fullest despite his error. All of his plans for Uzumaki Naruto were ruined by those two, but they also gave him the opportunity to give the same boy a chance to become stronger than he could ever be. He looked at Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, who was Uzumaki Naruto's sidekick, but he was much superior. He was exactly what the shinobi nations needed, as someone who would not think twice about turning anything that stood in the way of real peace into ashes. Since Uzumaki Naruto's passing, everything that the village had stood for had vanished, so Konohagakure no Sato also needed him. Instead of a leader who was too corrupt to understand how to lead soldiers into combat without sacrificing them like lambs, they needed a true leader. It was time to make amends for the mistakes he had made over the years. There was no time to waste. The only person he could trust, someone he knew would always be there for him, was this man standing by his side. The Spirit King said in a kingly tone, "I'm sorry, my friend, but before you can get the peace you so richly deserve, I have one more mission for you to carry out." The strong Shinigami let out a small sigh, sensing the direction of this. He had been serving his king for a long time, and he wanted to return to that of the elemental nations. Even though he had no desire to return to that location, he had no choice but to comply with his king's wishes. Perhaps he will be able to work through the strained ties he once had with his former genin in a tiny part of his heart. He had to first take those two away from what they had done to his parents, but his steel eyes and Ryotsu flared to life a little. His face and spirit grew cold with determination as he turned on his heel and gazed at his king. With his right hand on his chest, the old Shinigami questioned, "What is it that my king needs?" The Spirit King kept his face in a tight frown, but he smiled in his mind. With pride in every word, he declared, "You have served me faithfully for a long time, my friend. You are a soldier that any king would be proud of. I only ask of one thing: destroy those two men that have taken away the only chance you had with your parents. I want you to live nothing of them in that dimension." "Are you asking me?" the elderly Shinigami asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," the Spirit King said ominously, his voice containing only a deep distaste. "I want you to leave no trace of them. Destroy everything there is of their souls, along with anyone else that dares follow those two." With his right fist clenched tightly on his chest, Yamamoto nodded. His voice also became darker as he said, "Yes, my king. I will burn to ashes everyone that you have ordered me to do. Not a single one of them will dare escape from me." A faint smile appeared on the Spirit King's face as he nodded. "I know, my soldier, but first," he waved his hand, and his arm was suddenly covered in a great deal of sliver-white flames. As he pointed his left arm at the elderly Shinigami, he said, "I grant a wish to help you with your quest. Even though you are strong as you are, I want you at your absolute best to bring about my orders, my soldier." A second later, Yamamoto's entire form was covered in sliver-white flames. After a few seconds, it disappeared, revealing a version of Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto that had not been seen in more than 2 millennia. "Your body, the one you had when you were at your best, is the only gift I can really give you, my friend." He cracked a smile, just with a few modifications. He had never felt so full of energy as he did at the moment, and it had been a very long time. His eyes popped open, and he turned to face the Spirit King with a resolve that had not been seen in a long time. When he looked down, he saw that the left arm he had lost during his attempt to kill Sosuke Aizen had returned, looking as fresh as the skin of a young, powerful man. He was dressed in a typical Shinigami uniform, which was a perfect fit for him. He could feel the familiar weight of the 1st Division's white haori draped across his back. He frowns a little as he considers his size and realizes how he actually looks. To be honest, it was the same form he remembered from more than 2,000 years ago, with a few minor adjustments. His hair was tied up in a long ponytail, but it was still as long as it had been, flaring outward toward his lower back. His long bangs reached his chin and partially obscured his eyes. What annoyed him a little, though, was that his eyes were a deep cerulean blue, and his black hair had streaks of sun-kissed blonde. However, as he felt Ryujin Jaka's familiar weight at the left side of his sash, he mentally grinned. The now young Yamamoto turned to face the spirit as he said, "You are Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. You took that name as the new life you lived as a Shinigami. But you are also still Uzumaki Naruto, son of Namikaze Minato and Kushina Uzumaki, and godson of Toad Sage Jiraiya and Senju Tsunade. One of tragic life. The other life full of pride of honor. To fill out your mission I have given you, there must be some piece of Uzumaki Naruto on you, my friend." Yamamoto clenched his fist in agreement and nodded. "Uzumaki Naruto and I are one. I was born from his failures and childish dreams, and he was born from my hope of a full life. Even if I wanted to, I could not separate us. I will return as Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, as this form you have given me is more fitting, but neither will Uzumaki Naruto disappear." He raised his hands in gratitude, feeling somewhat at ease himself. "Arigato, my king." The Spirit King shook his head and laughed a little. His face darkened a little. "Do you know of Akatsuki?" he asked. "There is no need for that, my friend, just do what I will as command." A tiny amount of rage welled up in Yamamoto's chest as he scowled at the well-known name. He couldn't have forgotten the group that wanted him for the Biju that his father had sealed in his body, even though it had been a long time. He recalled that he wanted to pursue them and tried to appear tough because he felt powerless after witnessing Uchiha Itachi beat Uchiha Sasuke like a baby. His godfather had scowled at him, telling him that if he had pursued them, he would have been nothing more than a simple target for them. Although it was true, things had changed, and this time he would only be able to easily target them. "What of them, my king? Every person you are to destroy will come to you, my friend. It will come to you when you are close to them. Do not fail me, my soldiers. Destroy them," the Spirit King said in a voice so dark that it would have frightened any lesser man. "That organization follows those two men like nothing, put mere pawns, leave nothing left of their souls in the cycle." A light as bright as the sun itself flared around the Spirit King. Standing tall, the black-haired Shinigami compressed his body into a tiny sphere of Ryotsu. No matter how difficult it was, he would not let his king, the man who had provided him with a better life as a Shinigami, down. He had changed from being a helpless youngster who could only yell out a dream to a strong soldier who would stop at nothing to grant his king's wish. Nothing could stop him, and everything in his path would understand why he was known as the Guardian of Hell. Dimension of Elemental Nations, unknown place. Piece by piece, Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto's youthful body, which was around 20 years old at the time, came together to form the dimension he never imagined he would see again. It was an intriguing sensation, similar to the time Yawatch had split his body in two. Before converging into the recognizable shape of the Sotecho of the Gode 13 at a very young age, his consciousness had spread widely. He swooned and clutched his head as soon as his body had finished reforming. He had been cut in half before he passed away, even if he had been given a new left arm and his old, youthful body. With a frown on his face, he shifted slightly and looked around to gain a clear sense of his location. In contrast to Hueco Mundo, he was in a desert that was much warmer and brighter than Hollow's house. It seemed to loom above him, bigger than anything in Hueco Mundo, and the burning sun scorched the lands. As far as he could see, the landscape was composed of pale, granular sand, with only a few bare, pale trees protruding at random. Shigekuni Yamamoto took in the scene, not quite believing that he had made it back to the country where he had only ever dreamed as a child. He shook his head, going back to the thoughts that are currently most important. He examined his body once more, a furrowed brow spreading across his face as he relived all of the events that had transpired since his king had granted him the opportunity to reawaken. A mission to totally destroy anything those two men had forced their hands into was given to him. He still scowls at that and questions how Uchiha Madara could have lived long enough to persuade someone to follow his instructions. Although human life was unique, it could not possibly last as long as that of a Shinigami. Therefore, how could he possibly still be alive? Something didn't seem to add up for him, so he didn't like it. He had to first give out a gauge on the location of his Ryotsu before he could do anything to fulfill his king's wishes on this world. From what he could tell, the Spirit King may have given him a stronger body, but his Ryotsu may not be as high as it was at this age because he had learned from experience that his power was destructive. According to his body's feelings and behavior, he was currently between 700 and 900 years old, which is when he can recall being at his strongest. However, he didn't feel that way at the moment. He didn't feel weak. Rather, he felt that his power was the same as it was when he died fighting that bastard scum Yawatch. That made him smile gloomily, a little of his younger self returning with a vengeance. In any case, if he did possess that degree of power now, it was more than sufficient to handle anything the shinobi nations had in store for him. He wasn't here to play around or try to reconnect with old friends who did care about him. That wasn't the point. His king had given him only one mission, to kill, and he was going to follow it without question, no matter what. He closed his eyes, shifted slightly, and felt for the power he desired and was content with. The now young former Gode 13 Sotecho took a deep breath, allowing the familiar burn to purify him as the rising power heated the air around him and penetrated deep into his lungs. Deep within this vast desert, which he could infer was near Sanagakure no Sato, he was able to loosen his grip on his power, which at all times wanted to burn everything in its path to ashes. His eyes narrowed into slits as his right hand slammed onto his Zanpakudo's hilt. "Reduce all creation to ash," Yamamoto uttered while summoning his Zanpakudo's fire. Ryujin Jaka. Flowing blade. Like flame. flames burst around him like the sun, creating a flaming blaze that instantly turned the sand for miles around him to glass and illuminated the surrounding area like a sun on the very soil. His right hand was gripping Ryujin Jaka tightly, and the flames it produced were overwhelming him. With a roar of command that would have rocked the foundation of any man in his path, the black-haired Sotecho swung toward him. Taimatsu, torch. A monstrous fire erupted from his sword. A spiral of flame that snarled at Yamamoto as it devoured everything in its path like a rapacious devil of death. The fire surrounding the Sotecho did not affect him, and his now deep blue eyes never faltered, showing nothing but iron will and determination. With a wordless roar, Yamamoto inhaled deeply through his nose once more. Around him, a massive firestorm erupted to even higher heights, hotter flames that had started to take on a faint electric blue hue at their center. The young man collected all of the fire swirling around his blade with a slash of Ryujin Jaka, and then instantly put out all of the flames with a sharp flare of his power. The long black-haired Shinigami had sealed its flames that threatened to consume everything around him, but Ryujin Jaka, the oldest and strongest flame type Zanpakuto in all of Soul Society, was still free. Yamamoto was not at all bothered by the intense heat of the air around him. He had long since mastered the use of spiritual pressure to defend his body, particularly against the power of the flames wielded by his Zanpakuto. When he let his partner loose on the world around him, he felt completely at home with the flames that surrounded him, unlike Konoha, where he didn't feel like he belonged. He was accustomed to the element of fire. After practicing with his Bankai and using Ryujin Jaka for centuries, he was only impressed by the heat of the sun's fires. Only because Enetsu Jigoku focused all of his energy on destruction and little on his own defense had he caused him such severe harm. Yamamoto sighed softly and let go of Ryujin Jaka's flames, letting them only appear as a sword encrusted with flames. Reaching into his soul for his partner, the one who had been by his side from the start, he held it in front of him. The sword vanished a moment later, to be replaced by a humanoid figure of orange-red fire that bore a striking resemblance to Yamamoto. The rest of its face was a constantly shifting blaze, but where a human's eyes would be, two tiny electric blue flames burned. Slowly and deliberately, Ryujin Jaka hissed, "Shigekuni," in a high voice. "Why have you summoned me of all times like this?" "I seek wisdom," was Yamamoto's quiet but firm response, his gaze fixed squarely on his Zanpakutos. The sound crackling like hot embers made the strongest flame type Zanpakuto laugh. "You are old, Shigekuni. When you severed as the Sotecho of the Gode 13, your power waned, slowly but surely. You died of a samurai that did everything he could to protect what he thought was right. You have no need of wisdom from me." "I was old," the Shinigami with the black hair acknowledged. "But I still have a duty, one that was given to me by our king. The same man that gave us a chance to fix a mistake like we made 1,000 years ago against Yuwatch." Ryujin Jaka's body twisted as it split, reassembled, and writhed to itself in a way in an inhuman manner. "We have been partners for so very long, Shigekuni. We have won countless battles, and we failed to kill that man 1,000 years ago. As you said, we have a chance to help our king do more with the dimension we have both come from. Why is it that you need wisdom from me? Are you hiding behind duty? Are you afraid you'll fail?" With a long sigh, Shigekuni acknowledged, "No, against Yuwatch I did all I can to prevent that man from casting darkness over the world that I love, but I failed. But I have a new chance that was given to me. A chance to be able to do something to break away from that mistake I made by allowing that man to be able to live 1,000 years ago. I know you every thought, Shigekuni." Ryujin Jaka responded, "You've hid out Bankai for a millennium, waiting to catch him by surprise. Even with that, he still manages to do to us what we could not do to him. This chance you say that was given. The only thing I could give you as wisdom is do not show hesitation and end at anyone that stand in your way. We cannot be allowed to fail. This world may have tossed us aside before like broken glass, but we still have a chance to protect the few people that we still care about. As always my friend, you are correct." Yamamoto nodded, his eyes narrowing with a hellfire of determination. "You have my word. I will not allow myself to hesitate any killing any enemy that stand before me, however. You know my advice." "Yes," said Yamamoto, with a tone of laughter that no one who knew him had ever heard. "As always, you suggest to reducing all out enemies to ash, and protect what we love." "Of course," Shinigami and Zanpakuto said, laughing at the old joke before becoming serious again. The oldest Zanpakuto faltered a little as he gazed over the glass-stained desert with a fierce expression in his electric blue eyes. "Give all of yourself into every battle you intend to finish. Give all of yourself for those you have sworn to protect. Such is the way of fire. We burn our enemies as we consume everything in our path. It has been a very long time since we've been here. Thousands of years may have passed where we were, but from what I can see, only 3 years has passed. You are corrected, Ryujin Jaka, or should I say your old name, the name that was given to you by my son. A familiar voice said, Kurama. As Ryujin Jaka gazed at the silvery white figure standing beside him, his eyes narrowed and he bowed deeply. His voice was as deliberate as ever as he greeted, after all these years, my king, it is good to see you again. But I discarded that name a long time ago, just like my partner. I have lived a full life as Ryujin Jaka and nothing more. As wise as ever, the Spirit King nodded his face. As you say, my friend, your name is not that of Kurama anymore. Your name is that of Ryujin Jaka, the Zanpakuto spirit of me greatest soldiers. He grinned, and an old dear friend of mine. With a slight smile on his face, the former strongest Biju of the 9 gave a nod. He looked at his partner, who gave him a slight smirk, and said, and I was granted a partner that did not treat me as a monster, but as one of his greatest allies. You are right, my king, as my life as Ryujin Jaka, I'm more powerful than I've ever been. The Spirit King nodded, a faint smile spreading across his face as he yearned for the two in front of him. To his deepest sorrow, he had made a mistake and ruined any chance they had for a life in the elemental nation. However, that one small mistake gave them something greater. They are partners of the same soul that will never doubt one another no matter how hard someone tries. He nodded to himself, that mistake was no mistake as he could see. These two will do away with all their power that stood before them. They weren't the monster Kyuubi no Yoko and the people called him of this world, or the deceased last demon Brad Uzumaki Naruto. Rather, they were Ryujin Jaka, the strongest flame, type Zanpakuto, and Genryu Sai Shigekuni Yamamoto, the strongest Shinigami. This world will be saved, and it was going to be these two that cast it into a world of peace that it longed for. So my friend, the ruler of dimensions thought, jolting out of his reverie to gaze at Yamamoto's youthful form. So, how does it feel to be back in your younger body? Before his eyes narrowed, Yamamoto said, with a slight smile, it is to my liking, my king. I will not fail you, my king, but what is the reason why you have appeared again? You ought to know, my friend, already, the Spirit King scowled. Few could hope to survive a battle with you because you have the strongest flame. Type Zanpakuto. Although I have made you younger again, your power is still the same as it was prior to your death at the hands of Yawatch. The long-haired Shinigami nodded and declared, I know, my king. He added, I will not allow any enemy to stand in my way. The power I possessed prior to my death is more than enough. I promise my soul to do this. I know, friend, said the Spirit King, nodding. This may enrage you both, but I have to ask you to use your Bankai only if it is absolutely necessary, he explained, adding that even though your power is not as great as it was when you were this young, it is still far greater than most in this world. Without a single emotion on their faces, Shinigami and Zanpakuto nodded in agreement with their king's statement that using their Bankai on this mortal plan might burn the people of this world to ashes. It annoyed them a little, but they understood why they couldn't use their Bankai. In any case, their Shikai was more than capable of handling anything on this planet that would stand in their way and their mission. And if it came to using their Bankai, they would relish it to the utmost. Yamamoto responded on their behalf, saying, we understand, my king. Thank you both for this, said the Spirit King, nodding. Although this world is young, it has endured innumerable conflicts and bloodlusts caused by stupid mortals. Those who want to plunge this world into darkness should be destroyed. Nothing should remain of them. Yes, my king, Ryujin Jaka said, nodding, his body fluttering like the wind of flames surrounding him. Nothing will be left for the people you consider enemies. Not even their souls will be free to leave us. As he started to walk away, the Spirit King grinned and said, my friend, I have no doubts in my heart. Go now, you two. Shigekuni, who considers you to be a close friend, is in trouble with that group, Akatsuki. His voice disappeared, leaving only the two people standing there. Go to Sanagakure no Sato. Find out what you need to find Sabaku no Gara and kill the ones that captured him. Knowing what they had to do to ensure the safety of this world, the young Genryu Sai Shigekuni Yamamoto turned to face his Zanpakuto and said, I thank you, Ryujin Jaka, for everything you have given me since we've become partners. Ryujin Jaka hissed, as well as you as well, me friend, using a tone of voice that he only used with his partner. As always, you have the authority to command my flames. Burn bright, Shigekuni. The strongest flame. Like Zanpakuto's fire element swirled, constricting in on itself before disappearing. Yamamoto's lips curled into a rare smile, and his heart warmed as his Zanpakuto returned to his soul. It was good to have things going his way, and since his king had given him a chance to make amends for not being able to kill Yawatch, he wasn't going to let himself fail at it. His dark blue eyes narrowed into tight slits, remembering what his king had said. If what he said was true, then there was no time to waste, and he wasn't going to all those bastards of Akatsuki get what they want. They were all going to die, no matter how much they begged for their lives. Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto was going to give not a single bit of remorse to any of them. With flames flickering all over his body like a compressed typhoon of immense power, he muttered, "I will kill all within that organization." A massive cloud of flame, like dust, rose higher than the highest mountains in the elemental nations, and a moment later, a figure emerged from the cloud, his entire body covered in a powerful sphere of flame, like Ryotsu. Yamamoto wasted no time in rushing towards Sanagakure no Sato, his eyes hardening into murderous slits. Although his previous life had been brief, Gaara had made an impact on his life, and the red-haired boy who wanted to be nothing more than a monster had a more difficult life than he had as a Jinchuriki. In comparison to Gaara's childhood, the red-haired boy he remembered had a life that was nothing more than a fantasy. As the Spirit King nodded, he realized that he had made the right decision. "You must hurry, my friend. Sabaku no Gaara needs you, along with that pink hair girl you cared about so much long ago." The Spirit King watched in the distance as the former Sotecho charged forward towards Sanagakure no Sato in an impressive display of his power. For the first time, Hitaki Kakashi, Sharingan no Kakashi, Kakashi of the Sharingan, went above and beyond what he had expected, and he looked at the pink-haired student in front of him with a slight expression of pride, despite the fact that he had done everything he could to ensure that she was prepared for the world. Haruno Sakura, who had been the weakest member of Team 7 for the previous 2 years, had developed into a strong shinobi in her own right, but more significantly, he had been able to concentrate entirely on his students' training instead of doing what he used to do 4 years ago, right before everything he knew went straight to hell. Sakura had become a fine shinobi with the 4 years she had been training herself into the ground, having the sheer motivation to get back up even when she was beaten into the ground by him. She now took her job far more seriously than she did 4 years ago, taking every mission she went on with the greatest of success on her boards. This is why he couldn't help but feel proud every time he looked at his student. She was no longer a girl who didn't think she was strong enough to help her teammates, nor was she a girl who cared about a boy who didn't deserve her love in the first place. Sakura had been conceited and self-centered when the team he had failed to properly teach had first started, and she was only interested in herself and getting close to the traitor Uchiha Sasuke. However, after all the years of suffering she had endured since Naruto was killed by the very village she had vowed to defend, her entire personality had changed for the better and a little worse, as well as he could see it. Even though she wasn't at fault for Naruto's execution, the pink-haired girl had placed the blame on herself and no one else, and she still believed that if she had never loved Sasuke or pleaded with him to bring him back, he would still be with her today, still acting like the loud mouth they all remembered. She blamed the blonde-haired shinobi's death on herself no matter how many times he tried to explain it to her, beating it into her. It made him very sad to know that, in terms of teaching his student, he had failed to help the pink-haired girl the way he had wanted to, and that the only thing he could do was help her avoid making a mistake that would lead to her death. Kakashi didn't know what he would do if she ended up being killed, but he knew that it would break him more than anything else. He mentally sned at his thoughts, knowing that everything he had said about his student, that he was feeling the same way after everything that had happened. His blonde-haired former student, his sensei's son, was now dead and gone, and he had a part in it. The silver-haired Jonin would never forgive himself. He should have been able to do something to make sure that his student wasn't killed for something that they had no right to do. He should have seen it coming. Danzo had been trying to make a move to claim Konohagakure no Sato as his own for a long time now, but he never thought that the man would stoop so low to claim what was never his to begin with. But no matter how much he wanted to blame the man for Naruto's death, he knew he should have been able to do something to be able to stop all of it from happening. But what could he have done? Every last option that he played through his head would have played out with her death on his shoulders, and in his heart he knew he could not let that happen. The defection of Uchiha Sasuke to Orochimaru had been the perfect cover, knowing that with Naruto not being able to bring the Uchiha back to the village, the old war hawk would use this as a reason to have Naruto killed off before he had become a threat to his plans. The silver-haired Jonin cursed himself for not seeing this earlier, believing that if he had been thinking clearly, he might have been able to save Naruto from his death. The execution was not motivated by hate as some would think, rather, it was a result of the threat that Naruto was becoming to Danzo. The old shinobi had witnessed the progress that Naruto was making, and as a result, he wanted to make sure that Naruto was not given a chance to be able to ruin his plans to become Hokage when he did. But he had failed completely. Before he had even had a chance to get Naruto out of the village with Tsunade and Jiraiya, he had been arrested by Danzo and the council he had taken over. Knowing that he would not comply with any demands they were trying to buy over him, Danzo had threatened someone he cared about and used a stolen Sharingan's genjutsu to force his body to do his bidding. The sliver-haired Jonin could still recall those same words he had spoken to Naruto, and they still haunt him in his dreams. For what he had forced him to do, that man deserved nothing more than death or the worst kind of torture. He was startled out of his reverie by a voice calling out, "Kakashi! Sensei," and he turned slightly to see Sakura's single dark emerald green eyes staring at him. "Are you okay? You appear to be preoccupied with something." "Don't worry yourself about me, Sakura," he told her. "I might be getting old, but I can still handle myself just fine." The pink-haired girl merely stared at him for a moment before turning her gaze back in front of them. He laughed a little at her, but it was tinged with the same failure he had been carrying around for the past 4 years. The shinobi in question, Haruno Sakura, walked in front of Kakashi with the same expressionless expression on her face. Over the course of 4 years, the pink-haired girl's appearance had the opportunity to rival that of her second teacher, Tsunade, in terms of sheer beauty. She had changed from the petty girl she had been at 13. Because she wanted nothing more than to be the best in order to achieve her goal, she developed a body that would last her a long time in battle. Her body was well developed, giving her the body of a well-toned, curvy woman, and even though she concealed her expression better than any Kakashi had seen in a long time, it was evident from the way she acted that she was proud that she was no longer the girl with small breasts. In that department, she wasn't as large as the former 5th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, but it was close enough because of the way the many men who stared at her when she passed them made her look taller. Her pink hair had grown to a considerable length because she didn't want anything to remind her of her past transgressions, but Sakura couldn't care less about any of that. Her long pink hair reached the ground, but she kept it in a long ponytail, and her long bangs obscured her eyes from view. Her left eye, the one that Naruto had irreparably damaged, was completely hidden from view by the long bangs from her hair, but she kept a tattered long ragged that covered it. She used to wear a red keep-out dress, but now she wore a black, backless, sleeveless undershirt and an orange-blue jumpsuit jacket that she had left behind before Danzo had all of Naruto's possessions burned. She wore a black hakama with a blood-red sash holding it all together. She wore a black wrist guard on her arms, a jagged, personally carved X-shaped scar on her back. She wore a black hakama. Around her neck was the same necklace she had taken from Naruto, the one thing she said kept her close to him after he was gone. And on her right arm was the same headband that Naruto wore 4 years prior to his death. The Jonin with silver hair asked, "I wonder how Konohagakure no Sato has changed over the years," in an attempt to lighten the atmosphere a little too much. With the same look on her face, the girl with the long pink hair scoffed a little at that, saying, "Nothing's changed, Kakashi. Sensei. The rest of my so-called friends along with their senseis will still hate us just like before we left." In her heart, the long pink-haired girl knew that she would always hate them for what they forced her to endure during the 2 long years she had stayed in Konoha to train under Tsunade. Due to Naruto being executed by Danzo and the council, the black-haired war hawk had made it personally for everyone in the village to know that it was Team 7 that gave him what he needed to make sure that the demon was killed off. Believing the lies that Danzo had wrought against them, both her and her sensei were treated like nothing more than scum towards of the rest of the people she graduated with, along with a good portion of the shinobi that were still loyal to Tsunade. But she couldn't care less about any of them. The only thing she could do about it was to endure the pain that they put her through as long as she could, knowing that Naruto had went through far worse during the last days of his life on this world. Sakura could do nothing else but take it all in, not worry about it in the least and focus on nothing else but the training she needed to complete to get far stronger than she was. She grimaced in her mind at that, recalling how helpless and weak she had been when Naruto had needed her the most, but she didn't even care to see all that Naruto had done to care for her back then, when she cared about nothing but that cold-hearted bastard Sasuke. No matter how many years had gone by since that day in the cell she had shared with him, she couldn't say that she didn't love Naruto as much as Hyuga Hinata. It was just something she knew she had never deserved in the first place, and when she had gone to see him that day, he had given her all the pain she had deserved from him, even though she knew she deserved more than what he had given her. On that day, she wasn't looking for Naruto to forgive her. Instead, she had received Naruto's anguish and rage at being treated this way by the village he had sworn to protect, and she had gladly absorbed it all. In order to exact revenge on Uchiha Sasuke for what he had done to a boy who only wanted to save him, the pink-haired girl had trained for 2 long years as Tsunade's student, learning everything she could from the woman who was considered the strongest kunoichi in the elemental nations. Despite it being little, she had managed to learn everything she could under her master and also become a chunin. With Kakashi and the 2 years they had been away from the village, she had grown stronger than she could have ever imagined, absorbing everything her sensei had taught her, whether it be kenjutsu, ninjutsu, or genjutsu. Sakura had only wanted to be prepared for the day she would go after him and finally make him pay for what he had done to Naruto. During her journey with Kakashi, she had learned about the power of a certain enormous broadsword that was still in Nami no Kuni, so she had traveled to take it, but she had only broken it in half to take a large portion of it. Although the weapon she had made didn't look like Kuboi Kirabocho, she was somewhat pleased that the swordsmith had been able to incorporate the same abilities into her blade. As she gazed down at the enormous naginata in her left hand, she felt more at home with it than she had in a long time since her village had been destroyed. The blade, called Kai Shoken, Blood Redemption, was a truly enormous piece of art that would be admired by shinobi or samurai who saw it. The long, black handle of the blade was made up of several hilts, held together by a chain, and the large blade itself was jagged, with pieces that she had personally wanted placed on it. The blade had become her pride and joy, and because of its height and sheer weight, she was one of the few people in this world who could wield it. Even though Konoha had taken away her teammate, she had vowed to protect it because she knew that Naruto would at least want her to do so if he had been here, and none of that had happened. She knew that he would do everything in his power to protect the village he wanted to lead one day, and even though she hated the man who now led the once great village, she wanted to protect it for the people who still called that place home. Kakashi had taken her all over the elemental nation so that she could wield it as best she could after enduring harsh and difficult training and nearly dying multiple times during this journey. She looked up a little, remembering all the good times she had before her team was destroyed by one person's retaliation against his family member. She could still remember them chasing after the daimyo's wife cat and the other D-rank mission they went on, with the sky looking like this above her. She shook her head a little and turned her focus back to the road ahead. They were now walking through the dense forest just outside of Konoha, and the sky was bright blue with the sun's rays peeking through the gaps in the trees. Sakura's attention was drawn to a sudden change in movement, and he turned to his left to see a messenger hawk flying towards her with a scroll on its beak. Her brow furrowed, and she turned to Kakashi in bewilderment. The black-eyed Jonin had been informed of all previous missions before they arrived, so she had time to get ready, but it seemed that she had not received any information about this one. A second later, she stuck out her right arm and the hawk landed directly on it. "You didn't tell me I had a mission," she said in a light voice that she only saved for those in the village she still cared about. The sliver-haired Jonin, like her, had changed significantly in the 2 years they had been gone. He still wore the standard shinobi attire, but he had dubbed a black haori, which was covered in lighting around the bottom and the sleeves. His hair had grown longer, covering more of his right eye and headband than it had 2 years prior. A standard katana was strapped on his back, its red handle peeking from his right shoulder, and his hands were bandaged but left his fingers bare. Kakashi shrugged a little, his solid black haori moved as he did. "I may have previously received word from missions, but I have no knowledge of this one." Looking at the seal that had been placed on the scroll, he said, "From what I can tell, it's a mission from Tsunade-sama and not that of Danzo." Tsunade had made the seal herself after her role as Hokage had been replaced by Danzo's, and it still bore the sign of Konohagakure no Sato. She also placed a small sign of the Senju clan on it to indicate to the shinobi who were loyal to her that it was from her. The pink-haired Kunoichi stabbed Kai Shoken in the ground beside her as the hawk opened its mouth and dropped a scroll in Sakura's hand before flapping its wings and taking off. "No matter, if it's a mission from Tsunade-sama, then it must be something important," Sakura said, frowning slightly. As he waited for his students to respond to the mission they were abruptly given, Kakashi nodded slightly and straightened his posture. "So, what is the mission?" he asked once Sakura threw the scroll down and threw it at him, catching it and reading it quickly before he let out a frustrated sigh. Sakura picked up her large naginata and said, "She wants us to do a typical hunter ninja's task. She wants us to take care of it because we're so close to where the prisoners were last seen." After focusing his chakra, Kakashi used a single-handed seal and said, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique." He nodded and said, "Apparently a jailed ninja managed to escape a few hours ago and should be close like you said." The pink-haired girl nodded slightly when she saw a clone appear. "Are you scuttling to see if the clone can reach the prisoner before us?" Her teacher, who had already dispatched his clone to locate the fugitive, follows her as she turns around and leaps into the trees. "If it's all good to you, Sakura, I really want to get this over with quickly." The sliver-haired Jonin nodded, catching up to stand directly on top of his remaining student. Sakura remained silent, only nodding and speeding toward her suspected enemy's location. Sato Konohagakure office of Senju Compound's Central. Looking at the now Confident Hyuga girl in front of her, the former 5th Hokage remarked, "Good job on completing your mission, Hinata." For the surviving heir to the Senju clan, the 4 years since Uzumaki Naruto's death had been the worst. The first year, when everything that had happened had taken the life of a boy she considered her son, had broken her more than she had liked, and she had been nothing more than a broken mess for the entire year, of which she was still ashamed. She had spent the first 4 months in a life-threatening coma that most people thought she would not come out of, but she had managed to wake up even though she was still a broken woman from her previous state. The blonde-haired former Hokage had lost her position, but that didn't mean she lost any of the power and loyalty she had from the shinobi of this village. It wasn't nearly as much as she had when she was Hokage, but it was still enough to be able to keep the village afloat as best she could from the shadows. The princess of Konoha knew deep down that she couldn't stay like that for very long, no matter how much she wanted, because the village that her grandfather had played a significant role in building needed her, and she didn't want to leave this place without a leader. The dark blue, long-haired Hyuga bowed formally and said, "You're welcome, Tsunade-sama." The blonde shinobi's words raced through her ears every second, making her want to change herself into a better person that he would be proud of. Hyuga Hinata has kept her straight, Heim-style haircut, but she has allowed her hair to grow and flow to waist length. The short strands that frame her face are still there, but they are now shoulder length. Her figure has also become much more womanly, giving her the appearance of a shy beautiful woman that most of the village's men adored above all else. Like most shinobi in the village, she had worn the standard village uniform, which included a flak jacket, but with a few changes to suit her preferences and style. Her forehead protector was still around her neck, but it was now a dark orange instead of blue, something she wanted to do to remind herself of Naruto. Her face had matured over the 4 years of training she had received from her father and her cousin Hyuga Neji, and she was much more confident than she had been before. Everything she had done over the years had been for Naruto's sake and herself, to ensure that he was proud of her for finally being able to stand up to herself, wherever he was at the time. She had gray bandages covering her hands up her wrist, just like her cousin's hyper teammate Rock Lee. After watching him for so long, she realized that she could no longer afford to be weak and shy about anything. She was strong enough to defend what she cared about and restore Konohagakure no Sato to its former glory, and she needed nothing to hold her back like her shyness to speak out for what she believed in. Her father, cousin, and the rest of her family helped her become stronger than she had ever been before because she had gained confidence and changed her attitude for the better. After 4 years of intense training and learning everything she could, she was now one of the strongest kunoichi in the village, a title she was proud to have received from her friends and family. Her father gave her back her rightful place as heir after he realized how much potential she had developing inside of her with every day that went by between them. She was no longer the shy failure Hyuga girl she had been before. Instead, she was now a proud kunoichi who would do everything in her power to restore her home village to its former state. A slight smile crossed her lips, knowing that she was not traveling alone because the Konoha 9 and her friends shared her beliefs. Seeing the expression on the girl's face, Tsunade said, "You're done for today, Hinata." With a slight smile on her lips, the girl with dark blue hair nodded and said, "Thank you, Tsunade-sama." She straightened up and turned to face the door of the spacious room they were in at the time. "Are you aware that Hitaki Kakashi and Haruno Sakura will be returning today?" "That's good to hear, Tsunade-sama," Hinata said, somewhat low in a voice laced with clam anger, "but you are telling the wrong person this news. I care little that the two that caused Naruto-kun's death are about to return." The Hyuga heir froze at those words, her right hand tightening around the doorknob until it began to cave in from the force being applied to it. The blonde former Hokage let out a mental sigh at this, knowing that she should have known that the Hyuga heir had little regard for the other members of Team 7, especially Sakura. After Danzo had told the village those lies, the now-known Konoha 9 had wanted nothing to do with them, calling them both nothing more than scum. She and Jiraiya wanted nothing more than to clear the air and bring the 3 teams together to tell them the truth, but both Sakura and Kakashi had refused, claiming that their hatred for them was a just punishment for not helping a teammate in need. This was a difficult thing to do because she cared about both Kakashi and Sakura, but it was something that they both desired, so she could only respect their choice. Shaking her head and letting out a little sigh, she waved her hand slightly to wave away the young woman in front of her and said, "You're free to leave, Hinata." The dark blue-haired Hyuga nodded again before leaving the office, her footsteps echoing through the hallways as she hurried out of the large compound. She respected Senju Tsunade above all else, but she could not understand why she had allowed herself to be in the same room as those two. She had learned that Tsunade had treated Naruto-kun as if he had been her own son, and she had broken down when he was murdered by the council and Danzo. At first, like the others, she hated the blonde heir of the Senju clan for her and Jiraiya Sama, but she had learned the truth about what had happened to her and Jiraiya Sama. The same thing could have happened to Kakashi and Sakura as well, but it was extremely difficult to believe given the way both of them had behaved toward the sun-kissed blonde-haired sunshine she looked up to. Hitaki Kakashi, the self-proclaimed strongest Jonin in Konohagakure no Sato, was not a sensei in the slightest to her. He had led Team 7 and, based on what she had read and seen, had been nothing more than a useless teacher, helping that traitor when he asked for it. To her, Kakashi taught Naruto-kun nothing but the skills he knew in the hopes that the blonde-haired shinobi would be killed. It must have come as a surprise to him that Naruto was not one to back down from anything, that he would fight to prove that even failures can become something. His nindo to this day is something that Hinata had vowed to uphold no matter how many hardships she endured. She couldn't forgive that man for what he had done, and even though it was sad to hate someone, she had to live with her hatred for the sliver-haired Jonin. Haruno Sakura, on the other hand, was someone she hated more than anything. Everything that had happened to Naruto-kun was because of her. If she hadn't begged him to bring back a traitor, if she hadn't let him fall in love with her, maybe he would still be here, but she didn't even have the audacity to attend his execution, making fun of his memories. A voice shouted, "Hinata," from a short distance away. "Hinata? Is that you?" She was startled out of her reverie by the voice, and her eyes widened a little as she realized she was outside the Senju compound building, seemingly too preoccupied to notice. As she turned to face the voice's origin, she saw Ino approaching her, her long blonde hair bouncing with every step. "It's good to see you, Hinata." The young woman with the blonde hair said, "Did you just return from a mission?" Hinata smiled slightly and said, "It's good to see you as well, Ino-san. And to answer your question, I have just returned from a mission, about an hour ago to be exact." Hinata noticed a frown appear on her face suddenly, which Ino noticed right away. "I just had to go over things from the mission with Tsunade-sama." Ino crossed her arms over her well-proportioned chest and muttered, "I see," her eyes narrowing slightly as she noticed the mildly irate expression on the benevolent Hyuga in front of her. "Are you late for something? Or did something happen during your conversation with Tsunade-sama?" Hinata grinned a little as she glanced over the young woman, whom she had thought of as a great friend because of everything that had happened over the past 4 years. Ino was surprised to learn that the village had done something like that to Naruto of all people, and even though Naruto had irritated her with his constant behavior, it didn't mean that she hated him enough to want him killed. After learning that her former best friend Sakura had contributed to the death of her own teammate, the heir to the Yamanaka clan severed all ties with the pink-haired girl, believing her to be at fault. Like the other Konoha 9, Yamanaka Ino had been the only person in the village who did not despise him for what Naruto was. The 4 years had also changed the blonde bossy young woman's appearance to that of a grown woman. Her blonde hair, which had grown back from her fight with Sakura in the Chunin exams, was longer than before, and her once protruding bang had flattened against her face, and the bandages around her waist had been removed, exposing her well-toned stomach. She also has a pair of fishnet shorts on her knees and an open front purple apron skirt over a shorter black shirt, all of which she wears with short fishnet shorts underneath. She was dressed in a dark purple, short, stacked medical jacket that ended right at the end of her ribs. The status she had earned as a medical ninja and her clan's insignia were displayed on the far left side of the jacket. Her forehead protector was wrapped around her waist, serving as a sort of sash. Above her medical pouch were short tantos that her father had given her, and, in keeping with a long-standing custom, she had switched out her hoop earrings for the studs that her sensei had given her after they passed the Chunin exams. The dark-haired Hyuga said courteously, her frown still lingering on the corner of her face, "It's nothing really to worry about, Ino-chan. It's just that, Tsunade-sama wanted to inform me of some reason that Haruno-san and Hitaki-san were returning to the village." The young woman with the blonde hair scowled at that, feeling a little angry that she even had to get up to look at them now that they were returning. Tsunade-sama knew that none of them cared about those two after what they had done, so why would she tell Hinata of all people that they were going back to a village that they had helped destroy? Perhaps it was just the blonde's attempt to make those two feel like they were liked, which was pointless to even try when it wasn't even an option after what they had done. They deserved it, and perhaps going through it would allow them to see what Naruto went through before he died. "Don't worry about it," she reassured the Hinata, placing a hand on her shoulder and grinning slightly as the girl turned to face her. "Like the rest of us, you want nothing to do with them, so you have no reason to see them when they return." Hinata grinned and nodded in agreement with her friend's statement. She was right. After what those two had done, she didn't want anything to do with them. It was just something she would never forgive them for. Thanks, Ino-chan. She thanked, happy that she had taken that burden off her shoulders. It's nothing, Ino said, jumping a little and giving the girl by her side a thumbs up. It's what friends are for, isn't it? She asked, her smile widening. Hinata looked at the young woman with the blonde hair beside her as she continued to leave the Senju compound. So, what is it that you needed, Ino-chan? Ino's face was suddenly covered in a frown as her eyes widened. Hinata became a little concerned after seeing that expression, believing that something negative had occurred. She inquired, did something happen? With the same expression on her face, Ino shook her head and looked directly in front of her. No, it's not that. She replied, it's that I was ordered here by the Rokudame Hokage Sama to bring you to the Hokage office. What's on your mind? She asked, bewildered. Her voice was cold as she asked, and why would he need me of all things? Another person she detested more than anything was Danzo, who didn't even deserve to wear the Hokage's hat. Not just you, Hinata-chan, Ino told her, he wants all of us, the rest of the Konoha 9, along with Kakashi and Sakura as well. Another person she detested was going to be in the same office as them, despite her best efforts to avoid them for fear that she might make a mistake in attempting to kill them. She needed to do it, even though it would be difficult for her to control herself. Despite her dislike for it, she had to obey Naruto-kun's orders in order to ensure that she would be elected Hokage in the future and to make Konohagakure no Sato a village of which Naruto-kun could be proud. She nodded before starting to walk toward the Hokage office, where she hoped nothing would happen to interfere with her desired outcome. Let's go Ino-chan and get this over with, she said. The forest of Konohagakure no Sato, the village, is a few miles away. As she leapt from tree branch to tree branch, the long-haired Kunoichi made sure to look around for any traps in case the prisoner they were pursuing was shrewd enough to stall them before they could reach them. Although she had not yet spotted any kind of trap, in a pursuit mission like this, it was better to be cautious than reckless. In any case, she wasn't nearly as anxious as she would have been 4 years prior. She was certain she could defeat anything in front of her because of the 4 years of training she had undergone. There were benefits to being able to track chakra, and she was somewhat content with them. Tsunade had assisted her in using it, and Kakashi-sensei only helped her further so she could use it without hand seals like other people. Her ability to sense chakra was not as strong as that of others who had received more training in this area, but it was sufficient to support her in combat when she needed it. She and Kakashi had both made up excuses for why he created the shadow clone because they didn't want anyone to know what they were planning. The clone was actually used to simply scout ahead for obstacles or other things that could cause them trouble. The silver-haired Jonin had ventured into the southwest section of the forest in search of the accomplices of the criminal who had escaped from the prison of a ninja village. However, she wanted to exercise caution. She sent 2 clones ahead to observe her prey's actions, taking both of her master's lessons to heart. Based on what she had learned, the prisoner was going into a wooden cabin not far from her present location. In case the prisoner left again, the second clone had remained close to the cabin, prepared to expel him at any time to provide her with the information she needed to locate him. She was a little annoyed at having to deal with this, but her eyes were as expressionless as ever. However, her master, who she continued to believe was the legitimate heir to the Hokage's hat, gave her the order to do so. Calm down. Sakura shook her head slightly and whispered to herself. She would get into trouble if she became agitated at this time. In order to make this somewhat enjoyable for herself, she needed to finish it. Otherwise, she would sever that ninja's body. She forced herself to stop thinking about those things for the time being and kept walking through the forest until she eventually arrived at the location of the other clone. Its arms were crossed as it stood against a tree, seemingly bored with the entire situation, but its face showed no signs of boredom. Watching its original land on the ground a few feet away, the clone looked up. It straightened up and gave a slight irritated click of its tongue. Knowing that its task was complete, it immediately dispelled the statement. The prisoner is over there, inside that cabin waiting for his other 2 accomplices. Sakura gazed at the spot where her clone had disappeared, then turned to give the wooden cabin a little glare from a few yards away. In front of it, there was a clear space that was somewhat obscured by the trees that blocked out most of it. She had to acknowledge, albeit briefly, that the cabin was not as well hidden from shinobi who knew exactly what they were doing as they might have thought. Although it wasn't particularly noteworthy, she found it strange that a cabin of this type would be located on the outskirts of Konohagakure without Sato. In any case, she would just use a Kai Shoken strike to destroy the cabin after killing the ninja inside. Let's get this over with. Sakura moved out of the tree line that was obstructing her view and approached the cabin quickly. At the sound of footsteps, her pupils began to dilate slightly, and her bloodlust began to rise as her left hand clenched around the long handle of Kai's Shokin. Before a man emerged from the cabin, she froze in place and waited, her jaw clenched in anticipation. The man's eyes widened as he stepped out of the cabin and gazed at the young woman in front of him, feeling a storm of bloodlust wash over him. Sakura's expression was as emotionless as ever, but when she saw the person who made her think of an academy instructor, her eyebrows went up. The man in front of her had green eyes with a hint of madness in them, and white hair that was shoulder length with a hint of blue. When she was there, she dismissed him as a member of the Ninja Academy because he was so muscular and well built. He was dressed in tight black pants, a dark brown belt with a silver rectangular belt buckle, and a short, open blue vest with the sleeves ripped off. The man's eyes widened as he took in the young woman in front of him, but the initial shock subsided when he looked closely at the ninja in front of him. "Haruno?" He exhaled, a laugh rising in his chest as he did so. Her pink hair was a dead giveaway. "Haruno Sakura?" Sakura's brow furrowed slightly as she tried to identify the person in front of her. She raised her enormous naginata in anticipation, giving up on it, figuring it didn't matter because he would be dead in a few minutes. Even though there wasn't much hope in her voice, she did hope that the ninja in front of her would fight back before she killed him. The white-haired man laughed and remarked, "This is truly pathetic." With a casual smirk on his face, as if the girl in front of him posed no threat at all, he held his arms slightly over his shoulder. "As this is what Kona has sent after me. One of the weakest girls I remember being in the class that graduated 4 years ago. This is truly sad. I will not ask again, who are you and how do you know me?" He was about to say something else when a huge blade fell on his right arm, severing it from the shoulder. "You seem to not remember who I am. Well, it has been 4 long years since we have seen one another. I'm your former teacher at the academy." After a minute of staring at his right arm on the floor, he collapsed and let out a painful scream. The long pink-haired girl's right eye was slightly narrowed into a tight slit as she stood a few inches from him, both hands on her enormous naginata. Given that he was the same man who had attempted to murder Naruto and Iruka-sensei 4 years prior, it was understandable why she vaguely remembered him. Glancing down at the useless scum near her feet, she kicked him in the head, causing the ground to crack slightly beneath him. She didn't give a damn that he was hurting. That was something he should learn from his 4-year-old mistreatment of Naruto. Though she paused to think of something, she raised Kai's Shokin high above her head. Based on her knowledge of Mizuki following her transformation into a ninja, he wasn't particularly intelligent to be able to escape from prison in this manner. Additionally, it was strange that he was still in the vicinity of Konohagakure no Sato when he ought to have seized the opportunity to flee as far away from this location as possible. However, he had remained, as if he was waiting for someone or something to approach him. Her eyes narrowed, sensing that what she was thinking was similar to what he was attempting to accomplish. She pushed the enormous naginata downward to stab him in the stomach, orienting it so the tip was pointing at his back. The former teacher with white hair screamed in agony, "RGGGGHHHHH," as he struggled to get out from under the girl's red sandals. With a low growl of annoyance, she kicked him viciously in the back, causing it to shatter beneath the force of her chakra. Enhanced kick. "Shut up, and stop screaming like a coward," she yelled, "and tell me why you are still here." The white-haired man laughed, knowing he was going to die. He said, "Wouldn't you like to know?" With a bloody laugh. "But since I'm going to die, I might as well tell you. Then stop talking nonsense and speak. After I was given leave from the prison, I was told by them to pick up a package at this cabin for Orochimaru-sama." He let her know. Where was the package coming from? Sakura frowned at that. What was the item that was being picked up? She asked. Mizuki remained silent, nearly passing away from the deadly wounds he had sustained. She took out an explosive tag and slapped it against the white-haired prisoner's back, frowning slightly at the lack of information. When she was finished, she put her big blade on her left shoulder and started to move away. To activate the tag left behind, she sealed it with her right hand in a single-handed motion. There was no trace of the cabin or body behind her as the ground exploded in a huge cloud of dust. She jumped into the trees toward where she could feel Kakashi's chakra calming down, likely as a result of him killing the two who had followed Mizuki without even turning around to see what had happened. Now that her mission was complete, Sakura dashed through the tree's upper branches. The ex-teacher had erred in believing she posed no threat to him and had thus left himself vulnerable in such a conflict. She didn't care about it. In any case, assuming she was the same as before was a mistake that cost him his life. Now that the mission was over, she would be able to observe the changes that had taken place in Konohagakure no Sato since she had left 2 years prior. She heard a distant explosion a few minutes later. She narrowed her eyes, gained speed, and exploded out of the trees, landing on the ground. She looked up to see Kakashi standing a few feet ahead of her, his right hand covered in blood from holding his katana clutch. The Jonin eye with silver hair grinned at his pupil as he heard a familiar sound behind him. After wiping the blood from his katana, he sheathed the blade on his back and approached the quiet girl with pink hair. The sliver-haired Jonin looked at the blood still streaming down the enormous naginata and acknowledged, "It seems you're finished, Sakura." He gestured to the area where the bodies had been and asked, "Who was leading these two?" It was Mizuki, the girl with the long pink hair said. He was a ninja academy teacher before he was arrested for treason. "What is he doing in Konoha's forest then?" the sliver-haired Jonin asked, his right eye narrowing. "Shouldn't he be long gone from this place?" Unless he left his question hanging, knowing that the girl before would give him what he wanted. "He was here to pick up a package for Orochimaru," she explained to her instructor. "Before I was able to ask what the package was, he died." Feeling that he already knew what had happened, Kakashi gave a slight nod. Very few people who had been directly hit by Kaishoken survived to tell the story. "Good job, Sakura. Did you dispose of the body? And did he tell you anything else?" he asked, congratulating her. The silver-haired Jonin frowned deeply as she told him everything she knew, her eyes narrowing slightly. If Sakura's statement was accurate, then there was a traitor in Konoha who was circulating secrets that they couldn't let anyone else know. There was a good chance it was Danzo, looking for information about them somewhere. 2 years ago, Tsunade-sama himself, and a few people who still believed in him devised a multi-phase plan to restore Tsunade to office. It was dangerous even now because of Danzo's increasing influence across the nations as a result of his devious strategies. In any case, they only needed to locate and eliminate the spy if he was observing them from all sides. After nodding and saying, "Good job, Sakura," he headed into the forest in the direction of Konoha, still reflecting deeply on what he had heard. "Kakashi-sensei," yelled Sakura. "What is it, Sakura?" the pink-haired Kunoichi asked, her face expressionless as she kept up with her teachers. "Do you think it has something to do with what we are planning? Do you think this has something to do with Danzo?" Replied, "If you can, write down everything you told me and what you think they are planning on a scroll, Sakura." He instructed, "If I'm right about this, then very soon, there is going to be a war to see who has the right to rule over Konohagakure no Sato very soon." Sato Konohagakure Office of the Hokage. Gama Senin, Toad Sage, of Konohagakure no Sato, Senju Jiraiya, was becoming irritated. He stared at the bastard who sat at the Hokage's desk, whom he did not deserve, his black pupils narrowed into slits. His only desire was to murder this jerk and put an end to the suffering this man had caused the village for which his sensei had sacrificed his life. But he knew that if he moved now out of rage, he would destroy everything they had planned over the past 2 years, so he had to wait until they had the right opportunity to kill him. He had learned this over the years of being a ninja. They needed just a little more time to achieve their goals. The last 4 years had been difficult for him, and from his perspective, his entire personality had changed for the better. He lost his student's son, whom he was named godfather to, as a result of his actions. However, he had been out of the village when he should have been here, doing everything he could to support his godson, just when the boy needed him most. It had been his biggest embarrassment and one of the most important wake-up calls he had received since his birth. He made sure to train himself thoroughly so that he would be prepared for anything that might happen to the people he did care about after ensuring that Tsunade was well enough to work independently once more. The big summoning scroll on his back was all that was left of his appearance, which had changed significantly from 4 years ago. He had 2 shoulder-length bangs that formed either side of his face, and his waist-length, spiky white hair was still pulled back into a ponytail. He also wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil, signifying his association with Mount Myoboku, and he still had red lines running down from his eyes. With the exception of his black clothing and his student's flame. Like Haori, he now wore the same Konohagakure no Sato outfit as the rest of her shinobi. He blamed it for his inability to arrive in time to save his godson because his face appeared more icy and he stopped performing the perverted acts he used to do. After both of them had been devastated by Naruto's death, his wife, Senju Tsunade, whom he had loved since he first met her all those years ago, had finally consented to marry him. Even though they had lost Naruto due to these jerks, they had both learned to love each other even more than they already did, and it had been one of the best days of his life when the woman he loved said yes. He had not become a dark person who only desired to destroy Danzo and the entire Anbu Root division because he had her by his side. In addition to helping her move on with her life after Naruto was killed, she had taught him self-control. In the 2 years following Tsunade's departure as Haruno Sakura's teacher, the two of them had teamed up to train more intensely than before, raising their skill levels to previously unattainable heights. Now that she was somewhat closer to her Naruto self, Tsunade wore an entirely different ensemble than her previous one. She looked younger than ever thanks to the tight fishnet shirt she wore, which held her breasts in place on her chest. She wore a white kimono with dark red trim that was tight but slightly baggy. He showed her wearing a tight muscle shirt that only exposed the top portion of her enormous breasts, concealing the majority of them from view. The shirt was open all the way at the front. The Senju clan's insignia was embroidered on a large red sash that she wore, tied around her waist. Her hands were covered by bright red wrist guards that fit like gloves. Metal morns stopped at her elbows over that. She had a medic pouch and kunai pouch at her lower back and right hip, and she was wearing tight black long-sleeved pants. Her clan's and Konohagakure no Sato's insignias held the white kimono together. As she waited for her student and Kakashi to arrive, her expression mirrored her husband's, which was one of annoyance. With a frustrated look on his face, a brown-haired Chunin questioned, "What the hell are we waiting here for so long for?" As she stood next to her teammate, the Hyuga heir asked herself the same question Kiba did and simply spoke. It was quite strange. Why would Danzo have summoned everyone here in this manner? Something must have happened, or it must have been related to the recent changes in Konoha. Danzo had been making every effort to seize more territory outside of the Land of Fire, but Konohagakure no Sato's power had increased back to its previous level. That made her frown even more. She was a little angry that he was getting more land when he didn't need it in the first place. The old war hawk in front of them had always claimed to only care about Konoha's security, but in reality, he was guiding them toward a conflict that might break out between the nations of Kirigakure no Sato and Kumogakure no Sato. The man didn't seem to care that trying to destroy Konoha's enemies when they didn't have any would only result in pointless conflict. He only wanted power in his hands, based on what she had witnessed during his 4 years as Hokage. She could not believe that the daimyo himself would permit this man to be in charge of this village of all things, and it was disgusting to watch. "Stop talking, Kiba," the teenager with the dark brown hair said, standing beside Hinata. "You know like the rest of us why we are here. It has something to do with what happened in Sanagakure no Sato." The Inuzuka heir nodded slightly in scoffing. With increasing annoyance, he said, "I know that, but what is the reason why he is holding us for so long in this office like this? To me, it makes no sense whatsoever." Shikamaru, who was standing close to Team 8, narrowed his eyes slightly at the conversation going on between his team members. It was true that there was something strange about Danzo calling everyone here for something like this out of the blue. He had been keeping watch over Sabaku no Damari while she was inside the village walls, as he had been assigned to do. He managed to continue following his thoughts until the door of the Hokage office opened, causing his eyes to widen in surprise at the person entering. Hitaki Kakashi and Haruno Sakura were the two who had hurt Uzumaki Naruto the most without him even realizing it. They had been out of the village for 2 years, and from what he could see, they had both changed significantly. Kakashi believed the girl standing by his side to be Sakura, and she was dressed in samurai-style clothing. He stepped back a little as he looked at the enormous blade in her left hand, obviously copying its sheer sides. It should be impossible for anyone to handle something that big without any issues, but the girl in front of him was holding it as if it were a few pounds. The blood streaming down the blade, however, was what obviously startled him a little. It didn't take a genius to figure out what she had done before entering the office. When the two stood in front of him, the silver-haired Jonin said, "We're back, Tsunade. Sama, Jiraiya. Sama," he smiled. When Tsunade saw them, she grinned. In the 2 years since they left, both the teacher and the student appeared to have matured. Kakashi had changed somewhat, as she could see by the way he held himself in a constant, ready for anything stance in his lone eyes. However, of the two, Sakura, her second student, appears to have changed the most. The heavy burden of guilt behind her eye was gone from her lone eye. Though not as much as it had been 2 years prior, it was still present. Sakura's large naginata in her left hand impressed her, and she told her that the girl was using her chakra control to increase her strength. "It's good to see you two again," Jiraiya remarked, his lips quivering with laughter. "From what I can see, the both of you have gotten a lot stronger." Sakura gave a slight smile as she nodded. "We have," the woman stated. "The only thing now is to see if it is enough to help us out." Kiba abruptly said, "That's great," glaring at the two people in front of him as well as the others. He looked at the two Sannin and said, "We have a killer here with us now, along with our helpers. Was this why you were waiting?" Jiraiya gave the brown-haired Chunin a chilly glare and said, "Shut up, Inuzuka. It is none of your business why we make you wait. The only thing you have to do is follow orders and nothing else." "From whom?" "You forgot Jiraiya. They are my ninja, not yours, a voice said behind the big, white-haired man. You are in the same position as them until you are appointed Hokage, at which point you can issue those commands. My apologies, Hokage. Sama, Jiraiya growled slightly, the big white-haired man said, nodding his head in the direction of the war hawk while clicking his tongue in sheer rage. It won't happen again. Shinobi no Yami nodded, somewhat relieved that the Toad Sage could see that he, not him, was in charge of this village. Make sure it doesn't happen again, he said. Now, why did you hold us up like this for these two, princess? The man in front of her was a frail, elderly man who usually walked around with a cane. He had black, shaggy hair, and his right eye was bandaged, hiding the curse of Sharingan he had used on her to give the order to have Naruto executed. He wore a white shirt with a black, dark gray robe over the top that covered from his feet to just over his right shoulder. Like her husband, Tsunade scowled at the prospect of killing the man who had destroyed the village her grandfather had built and had Naruto killed, but she knew she would have to wait. With icy eyes, she stepped forward to face Jiraiya and said, "Several hours ago, we received word about a prisoner breaking out of jail by unknown was." Oh. Danzo's lone eyebrow furrowed slightly. If what you say is true, then why wasn't I informed about this? He said, sounding interested. It wasn't needed, Tsunade said, maintaining the same expression. I sent it to give it to both Kakashi and Sakura to be able to carry out because I had been able to get the message when it came in by messenger hawk. Who ordered you to take this action? Are you as much of a fool as that husband of yours? Danzo said icily. Or have you lost sight of the fact that you are no longer deserving of leading this village? No, I have not forgotten about how I'm unworthy to govern this village. A calm expression replaced Jiraiya's eyes as he growled darkly at the insult to his wife, but was restrained somewhat by Tsunade's arm holding him tightly. But due to it being only something small as this, I wanted it to be done quickly, which I thought that you would want as well, Hokage. Sama. The princess of Konohagakure no Sato's eyes narrowed slightly, observing how Danzo's eyes seemed to twitch a little after she gave her report. She would figure it out later, but if she was right, the man in front of her had something to do with that man's ability to escape from jail in that way. It was all the reason they needed to be more cautious with their plans. She turned to face her husband and noticed that he was wearing the same expression. Even though you are a great hope to help Konoha from his enemies, it would be far too easy to find an Anbu commander that can replace you, the Rokudame Hokage said, leaning back slightly in his desk and nodding at the reason. I see the point out have made Tsunade, just make sure it doesn't happen again. I hope you keep that in mind. Stepping back a little, Tsunade nodded and said, my apologies, Hokage. Sama. Now, the reason all you are here are simply, other than that of Jiraiya and Tsunade. The 6th Hokage clarified, we received word 30 minutes ago that the cage of Sanagakure no Sato had been captured by the organization Akatsuki. Danzo remained silent, not even glancing in the direction of the blonde woman. The news caused the eyes of the entire room to widen. Sakura's remaining eyes narrowed in anticipation as she stood by her teacher's side, thinking that this would be the best chance to find Uchiha Itachi because little was known about Orochimaru and his hiding places, and every time they were about to find them, they managed to get away just before they arrived. This was her only chance to make sure that Uchiha Sasuke showed his face, and if she killed Itachi, that bastard would come running for her in retaliation. She clenched her fist anticipatingly, practically tasting Naruto's retaliation on her tongue. Sabaku no Tamari, a few feet away from the girl with the pink hair, froze at the news of what she had just heard, feeling cold all over. How could Akatsuki have entered her village and captured her little brother in this manner? It didn't seem possible for something like that to happen. Her little brother had become one of the strongest ninja with the elemental nations over the course of 4 years. Could a criminal organization really walk in the village like that? She couldn't stay here any longer. She had to return to Suna in order to be able to assist in getting her brother back at any cost. When she turned to leave without saying anything, 2 Anbu root agents blocked her path out of the office and gave her a vile glare. What the hell do you think you're doing? With her dark green eyes fixed on the black-haired Hokage, she practically yelled, I apologize, but I don't have time to stay here. To assist in getting my brother back, I must return to my village. As they considered Gaara, the Konoha 9 remained silent for a while, their faces twitching with anxiety. Without showing any signs of emotion, Danzo said, I know that, Sabaku no Tamari. That is the reason why they're here, he said, gesturing to the 3 teams that stood on the far left of Team 7. A little taken aback, the dark, blonde woman said, you're assisting us. She asked a bit suspicious on where this was going, for what? Now that you know the reason on why I called all of you here, I will be sending Tima, Danzo said, turning his head away from her without even bothering to respond. Sakura abruptly appeared in front of her, staring him in the eye with a dark expression on her face. With a mask of emotion on her face, Sakura said, "Hokage Sama, I would like for you to see me and Kakashi to help in the rescues of Sabaku no Gaara." He didn't display any signs of surprise on his face. "Why would I do something like that? Your status as a ninja is poor at best, and you seem too weak to be able to handle a mission of this rank," he said, maintaining the same expression as he gazed at the girl in front of him. Sakura wore a more subdued expression, but she was furious that this old bastard would dare call her weak after everything she had been through of 4 years of suffering, being beaten to the ground until she found the strength to get back up, proving that she had grown stronger over the years, but none of that mattered at the moment. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, and the people she was pursuing would undoubtedly be involved. All she had to do was make sure she was assigned the mission to be able to go. Sakura's voice made the same sound as usual as she said, "Yes, I must agree with you that I was weak 4 years ago. But over the 4 years I have changed. I'm stronger than I have ever been, and I will not fail this mission if you allow me to go." "Even though what you are saying is true," Danzo began, shaking his head and turning to face Team 8. "But neither you nor Kakashi are fit for a mission like this. Team 8 is the sensible choice in this case, and we need a group of ninja who can find the Akatsuki." From her vantage point, Hinata thought, if her team is given the chance to be able to help Tamari-san out, then it would give her a chance to be able to talk to Gaara again after all this time. She had formed a close bond with the red-haired Suna ninja after Naruto Kun's death because they both had admired Naruto for who he was, and she wanted to do everything in her power to be able to help him as much as she could. "If I may," Tsunade said, "Kakashi and Sakura would both be ideal for this based on what you're saying. In the event that Gaara sustains any injuries, a skilled medical ninja will be required to treat them. If you truly want this mission to succeed, you will send Kakashi, one of Konoha's best tracking ninjas, to finish the job." Danzo scowled, a little incensed that one of his own shinobi would dare to give him instructions in his own workspace. In any case, both a rival village and a possible enemy would fall if everything did go as he had hoped. This gave him a mental smile, a sense that everything would turn out the way he wanted it to. It was only a matter of time until he received a letter about Sanagakure no Sato falling because he lacked a case cage, and Tsunade was unaware that she had orchestrated something that would benefit him. He nodded to the blonde Sanin, putting the thoughts aside for a moment. Looking at Sakura and Kakashi, he said, "You are correct, Tsunade. Team 7 has been giving a new mission, S-ranked. You are to go to Sanagakure immediately and assist them in the case cage's retrieval. The front gates of Sanagakure no Sato after 3 days." It had taken them 3 days to reach Suna, and during that time, Sakura didn't say a word. She didn't have to because she was finally given the opportunity she needed to understand the retribution Naruto so richly deserved following his ordeal. Sakura merely hoped that she was prepared and that everything she had learned and trained for would be sufficient to take on S-class ninja. The only thing she needed to do was concentrate on the task at hand and make sure she didn't fail. This was not the time to worry about anything. When they arrived at Suna's enormous sand gate, they were halted by a tall Suna shinobi who was flanked by multiple others. "Halt," he commanded. "What are Konoha shinobi doing here? The treaty made by our villages states that you are now allowed in unless it has something to do with the well-being of the village." "Baki Sensei." Tamari stepped forward, acknowledging, "They're with me and they are here to help in trying to bring back Gaara from being captured by those bastard Akatsuki members." "Help?" Baki asked, a little taken aback. Kakashi stepped forward to respond to the questions that were going through Tsunajanan's mind and said, "Yes. Because our Hokage thought you might need help, he sent us to help as much as we could." Then, he pulled out a scroll and held it up to him. "If you think we are lying to you just to enter your village then," he said, "then this will justify why we are here." Baki scowled at the 2 people in front of him after reading the scroll. He detested having to show gratitude for a Konoha ninja's assistance, but he had to swallow his pride because he knew they needed it in this case. He had to ensure that these 2 blatant scums would not do anything while they were here because they were the 2 most despised shinobi in both Sanagakure and Konohagakure. A ninja standing by his side received his lone eye and gave him a silent command. The ninja nodded and leapt away. He needed to make sure that his village was safe from the danger that was in front of him if they were going to stay and assist. The Jonin with silver hair narrowed his eyes, preventing any emotion from crossing his face. Baki would be seriously mistaken if he believed he didn't see that. But he was happy. He had explained to Sakura everything he knew would occur once they entered Suna village before they had come here. They had grown accustomed to the shinobi's hateful gazes over the previous 4 years, so they weren't particularly concerned about it. They were not here to make friends, as most people would assume, so they were not at all put off by those appearances. The only thing that both of them worried about was the mission. He glanced in the direction of his last pupil, nodded, and started to follow Baki into the village. Baki was a very tall man who was one of the head ninja in the village of Sanagakure no Sato. His head is hidden by his turban, like headgear, and a sheet that hangs from it on the left side of his face, leaving only two characteristic red markings on the right side of his face. He was dressed in the typical Suna ninja uniform, which included a flak jacket and a forehead protector. He had the disposition of a devoted, considerate, and well-respected ninja. Although like many Suna ninja, he could be ruthless and stern in battle, as they are all trained to put accomplishing missions before comradeship. But most of that has changed over the 4 years, due to Gaara becoming the Kage during that time. Following close by her teacher's side, Sakura kept her mind on nothing else other than the mission before her. Most of the things she was here for, she could care less about, but due to Gaara seeing Naruto as a dear friend before his death, she would put all her power into being able to help Gaara back towards his village. This was also a great opportunity to be able to lower Akatsuki's numbers. They just had to tread carefully on the way, not falling for any traps that they might set up. The large blade in her left hand was eager. She could almost feel as screaming for the blood of those who brought this upon themselves. All she had to do was wait for a bit longer, then everything would go the way she had wanted for a long time to come. Baki, Tamari spoke suddenly, eyes still filled with worry. Where's his Kankuro? Is he okay? Baki sighed sadly, when the Akatsuki left with Gaara. Sama, your brother. He was cut off as the air around them suddenly got extremely hot, almost getting the levels of being unbearable for them to stand around in the open. Seconds later, what seemed like a powerful wave of chakra seemed to slam into each of them, causing each of them to break out into sweat. Sakura looked around her, gritting her teeth as she pushed her body as hard as she could to not allow herself to pass out from the sheer force of it. Something was wrong here. Not a single source of energy on the planet should be able to exert them much power. But whatever was doing it with any problem whatsoever. Was it the Akatsuki doing this? She shook her head at that. Even though they were strong, Sakura didn't believe that a single one of them could be able to do something like this. Turning her head a bit, she looked at her sensei, who was also struggle a bit to breath. What is Thisa? Kakashi. Sensei? She asked. Kakashi looked at her, seeing several shinobi around her that seemed to be on the verge of suffocating on their own spit. Ia thought that Ida was a tailed beast. He tried to explain as best as she could. Buddha, the feel of Thissa power feels different, along with the being far more powerful Tana anything I have ever felt. Before Baki was able to say anything, Tamari looked at the sky above them with a look of horror on her face as a huge flame, like comet, seemed to shot down towards the front of the gate. Before she was even given a chance to warn everyone, the comet slammed into the ground, causing a massive explosion on impact. The shockwave that followed it blasted them off their feet, knocking them hard into the buildings that seemed to have melted a bit due to the intense heat that was around them. Flames seemed to be everywhere, causing the very ground they were standing on to becoming nothing more than glass. Most of the Suna ninja had been knocked unconscious, scattered across the area on which their bodies had landed. What the hell? Baki shuddered out, picking himself up from where he was. He looked up, eyes widening at seeing a single figure walking out of the firestorm that was slowly falling apart around him. He shuddered a bit in fear. The look in the man's eyes gave him nothing more than fear of the worst kind. It was as if he was nothing more than a mere ant to this man, even though he looked younger than he was. Sakura, Kakashi and Tamari were in the same boat, looking at the man that was walking towards them with a dark look in his eyes. The man walking towards them was tall, seemingly standing at the height of 5'9" or 5'10". His black hair was long, a bit shorter than Sakura's was, but in a neat long pony tail that blew in the wind. His eyes were a dark blue, almost the shade of the sky darkening when it's growing dark. His entire body was built from what they could see, showing a body that was far more muscular than most shinobi they had seen. He was dressed in a black shiakusho with a white sash towards his waist. Blowing in the wind behind him and somehow not being blown away from the explosion mere seconds ago, was a white haori which he had draped over his shoulders rather than actually wearing it. At his right hip, which Sakura had instant taken notice of, was a standard katana, with a dark purple handle and a circular hand guard. Even though he had the katana in his sheath, for some reason, Sakura could practically feel the power radiating from the blade. It caused her to shiver in fear. It was like the sword was made for reaping lives. Getting over his shock, Baki narrowed his eyes a bit as he looked at the man. Surround him, he ordered, now. Shakily, and filled with fear, the Suna ninja that did manage to stay conscious from the unknown individual's arrival surrounded the man in a circle. Baki stood, along with Tamari and the remaining 2 members of Team 7. They walked slowly towards the man, with a lot of caution due to the power the man had admitted. A friend or an enemy, they didn't know which one he was. That's why they had to stay on guard at all times. From the man's stance and the way his dark blue eyes seemed to glare at all of them, it looks like he could kill all of them without any problem at all. "Who are you?" Baki asked, looking at the man with a now dangerous look in his eyes, but it was nothing more than a front, a fix to make sure the man didn't see the great fear that had built in his eyes. The long black-haired man said nothing at first, casting his gaze towards Team 7, which grew darker when landing on them. Both Kakashi and Sakura stepped back a bit, both ready themselves if the man made a move to kill the both of them. It was no surprise that over the 4 years that has passed, that Konohagakure no Sato had gained more enemies than they ever had before. The only thing they can think of was that he was nothing more than an enemy sent to kill them, probably from a village that Danzo might have sent shinobi in to attack to take over their government. "My name is Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto," the man said with a voice that demanded nothing but respect from all around him. "Why are you here?" Tamari asked, her war fan ready at any moment if the man attacked. "Who sent you here?" "Where is Sabaku no Gara?" She shivered. Why? Haruno Sakura really couldn't tell. It wasn't that she found him sexually attractive or anything, it was just that she could tell just by looking at him, that this young man standing mere inches away from her demanded respect. It was just something that her body could tell, just by the way the black-haired man looked at them like they were nothing more than ants compared to him. In all honesty, Sakura knew deep down in her heart that she should feel angry about this, for allowing her body to feel any type of fear for this man, but it was just something that her body couldn't stop. This man radiated power. She could practically feel it nipping at her skin as she stood so close to him. Without even noticing it, her left hand clenched tighter around her large naginata, fearing for the worst if this man did plan on attacking them by the cold look in his eyes. The thoughts that plunged into her mindset were case out immediately, knowing that not a single thought was correct on what she was seeing. From what she was seeing and feeling from the man before them, he had the chakra level of that of a civilian, but does have power that was still rolling off of his body in small waves. It was nothing more than facts that this man was powerful. Just because he didn't seem to have a large chakra pool, that didn't mean that he was weak. She learned that 4 years ago when she had met Rock Lee and saw his determination to become stronger, even without the use of chakra. The black-haired man seemed to be the same, and the way he held himself along with his stance, she could tell in an instant that this man was a swords master of the greatest kind she might come across. A very small smile appeared on her face, remembering just how much that lesson was drilled into her during her 2 years around the elemental nations, along with spending a year in the country of Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron. Both the silver-haired Jonin at her side and her teacher in the Land of Iron drilled that lesson in her head. Even though not as common as shinobi in the elemental nations, samurai were a unique type of warrior that prides themselves in their honor. By that, some shinobi thought of them as nothing more than weaklings, samurai who used chakra to be able to strengthen their power to match that of a shinobi. But even with that, from the pain and hardships she'd went through over the years of trying to become a better person, she knew that chakra wasn't the thing in this world that made a person strong like some might think. Even without chakra, a samurai could be just as strong as a shinobi with or without it. The only thing that really mattered was just how much that person was skilled with his katana. She shook her head a bit, her long pink hair flying around her head a bit as she did. That was just nothing more than mere thoughts. Just because he didn't have chakra, did not mean that he didn't have some type of power within him. What she was feeling from this man did feel a bit like chakra, but it wasn't nearly as much as it should be. This power felt different, almost heavy, as the man seemed to admit it a bit around his body on purpose, like he was trying to lure one of them to attack him. It was a bit unsettling, but it was just something she was going to have to deal with until this man gave them a sign that he wasn't here to annihilate them like nothing more than mere tools that were no more of further use to their villages. Looking at the Suna shinobi that Baki had sent to surround them, man, it really didn't take much to see that they were deadly nervous to be around this man. From the way a good section of the large gate in front of them was nothing more than shattered glass, she really couldn't blame them for being as scared as they were. The bodies that laid around them were unconscious, but it was a bit hard to believe that it was just because of this black-haired man doing nothing more than releasing his power around them. Wanting to know exactly what he did to have this kind of impact on the area around him, she slightly clenched her right fist. She didn't know why she wanted to know. Perhaps it was because she respected his strength and the fact that he didn't even bat an eyelid when they were around him, despite the fact that he was currently somewhat of an enemy. Looking at the black-haired samurai in front of him, the Suna Jonin commander commanded, "Identify yourself now, stranger." His voice had a sharp edge. "Where did you come from and why are you here?" he asked. Formerly known as Uzumaki Naruto, Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto gazed at the people around him with a look of near boredom. Because of the way he entered the village of Sanagakure no Sato, he had anticipated this outcome. Indeed, he could have simply walked into the village as anyone else would have, and perhaps he would have done so if the situation hadn't been as dire as it was. However, it wasn't. The now young Sutecho sensed that something wasn't right even though he was driving here at crazy speeds in comparison to those around him. It wasn't that he couldn't sense Gaara's presence in the village. Rather, it was that he could feel Gaara's life force slowly leaving his body, albeit in a tiny and agonizing way. Before he even took off, his first instinct was to go to the location where he could sense Gaara, but he scowled at the idea after losing sight of the red-haired shinobi's location. He sensed that something was preventing him from being found, but he also sensed that the source was exerting a significant amount of its power in order to achieve this. However, once he had obtained the necessary items from outside this village, it would not be long before he could locate Gaara, which he knew would take him straight to the bastards his king wanted him to eradicate. Even though it was tiny and nearly invisible to others, Shigekuni could feel a tiny, dark smirk appear on his face as he expressed his intense joy at eliminating these scum. Really, it was just a matter of time, and he was going to relish every moment of killing them, even though he would never let anyone witness it. His amusement at experiencing something he hadn't felt in over 1,000 years caused his eyes to narrow, but not out of rage. He couldn't help but feel a little thrill and bloodlust erupting from his body, even though he was positive the prey he was pursuing was far weaker than he was. Even though the Soul Society and the Gotei 13 had been his greatest treasures in his second life, he really didn't get to fight as much as he had wanted to, and no one could really blame him for it. He experienced the pride of a father as he watched his soldiers go out to fight and defend their beliefs. It was small, but he wanted nothing more than to be able to fight with them than he had before he passed away. However, his position required him to let his taikos fight before he did, so he was unable to do so. Seeing the majority of them beaten to near death or nearly killed was sometimes extremely difficult, but it was the only way he could be certain that he believed in them to defend Soul Society. Now, however, none of that matters. When it came time for him to protect them as he should have, he completely failed against a man he believed he had killed 1,000 years ago, which filled him with shame and rage. Having failed to see through it, he cursed himself once more. He would have realized that the Yuwatch he was battling was merely a cheap Quincy with the special capacity to change into Yuwatch himself if he had simply not allowed his rage to overcome him. Oh no. He was certain that he could have killed the real Yuwatch with his Bankai without any issues if he had simply noticed it and gotten rid of him sooner. However, it did not occur, and he would have to deal with it for the remainder of his life in this dimension. According to what his king had told him, however, he was relieved that Wandenreich had been declared the victor and the Gotei 13 the loser. This was his moment, his chance to atone for his past transgressions, and he was determined to succeed no matter what obstacles he faced. His former self, not that of Uzumaki Naruto, but that of a formidable young Shigekuni Yamamoto, feared in all three dimensions, was returning. Shigekuni set aside his thoughts for a later moment and gazed at the Suna ninja with the same icy expression that made his adversaries shudder. He wasn't letting go of his spiritual pressure, and because he didn't need it, the same thing happened almost immediately. The longer he stared into those icy dark blue eyes, the more the elite Jonin of Sanagakure no Sato froze, feeling as though his very life was being sucked from him. However, he persevered as long as he could and pushed the fear from his body because he had learned from his extensive experience as a shinobi of Suna that he should never be afraid of his adversary, regardless of how powerful they were in comparison to him. It was difficult, but he was determined not to let this man know how much he dreaded him. Impressive, said the former Sutecho, who had long black hair. Even though it's still a little pitiful, he was able to keep his composure. I have already told you who I am, he said in a professional manner, but his voice was as icy as his eyes. But I'll say it again. My name is Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. I am a visitor from the Soul Society to see Asuna. Shinobi by the name of Sabaku no Gaara. Baki's expression paused, and like him, the faces of the other shinobi encircling Yamamoto contorted into a look of utter indignation. Sadly, they were all wrong if they even had the slightest impression that he was impressed. The cage? Baki demanded, his voice brimming with anger. Why are you here to see cage, Sama? The Shinigami with the black hair didn't display any signs of surprise on his face, if he was taken aback by this. Taking a very slight stance that the Jinchuriki of the Sand Biju had attained such a prestigious rank, Shigekuni said, he is the cage of this village. Interesting. But why do you wish to know my purpose here? Are not all ambassadors permitted to see your cage? Shigekuni asked. As Baki reviewed what the man had said in front of him, he faltered for a moment, his eyes losing some of their grit. It was true that any ambassador from any village or country was allowed to see their cage, regardless of how much the local shinobi disliked the individual. The K's cage or the council itself were the only things that could prevent this kind of thing from occurring, but only to a limited extent because they lacked the authority that the cage of this village possessed. Telling this man what had happened to their cage was almost unnerving at the moment, though, because his gaze was fixed on the man in front of him. He had never witnessed the amount of damage he had caused simply by landing on the ground, but he appears to have no animosity toward the village of Suna. Normally yes, however, when the half-covered Suna.nin felt that the man in the black and white clothing was once again not hostile, he slightly relaxed his defenses. Slowly but surely, the other Suna.ninja followed their current leader's lead. Gara Sama has been kidnapped recently. With a look of incredulity on her face, Sabaku no Tamari looked back in disbelief and turned to face her sensei. How in the hell was her sensei ill? There were negative consequences to telling a total stranger about it. Although they were unaware of this man's background, she perceived him as Suna's enemy based on the way he entered her hometown with the intention of damaging anything that stood in his way. But there was something strange, really strange, about him. To her dismay, it seemed as though her whole body had frozen in terror, even though she knew he was an enemy based on the sheer strength emanating from his body. Sensei! Exclaimed Suna's blonde Jonin in surprise. What do you think you're doing? Yamamoto looked at the tall, strikingly beautiful Suna shinobi with blonde hair in front of him and cocked his head to the side. He was impressed by the way she carried herself, but he wasn't attracted to her in any way. She held herself in a way that demanded respect from anyone who stood in her way, despite the fact that she was a woman and that men would inevitably view her as weak. However, her attitude toward him was somewhat understandable. She had good reason to be wary of him because he was the type of person who would just tear down their wall defenses as if it were nothing. Even though it was only slight, the way she behaved toward possible adversaries in front of them made him think of Soy.Fon Taiko. She wore an overcoat that was somewhat dark purple, with a grayish outline, and the collar was folded. A dark violet turtleneck was worn underneath, shielding her enormous breasts from the men's prying eyes. A dark red belt and another gray belt that angled to fit over her left pocket held up her tight black shinobi pants, which reached her knees. Her hair hung down to her upper back in 3 long ponytails, with 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom of the 2. She had a long black line running over her nose for some reason he didn't know, and she wore purple shinobi sandals that were stopped by the fishnet sockets that ended where her pants did. The long purple overcoat partially obscured the black metal plated gloves covering her hands. The Shinigami was impressed by the 2 large battle fans she held in each hand, each of which had some kind of design on it. She narrowed her eyes as she gazed at him, but she was making a concerted effort to hide the tiny bit of fear she harbored for him. Anyone else in her shoes would be in the same boat as her, so he couldn't hold her responsible for something like that. Without even addressing Gaara's older sister, he turns back to Baki. He was convinced that Akatsuki was the one responsible for this if the Suna-Jonin's account of it was accurate. According to what he recalled from his old sensei, the Akatsuki would have to wait 3 years before they began hunting the tailed beast. If he was correct, he grinned. This would be more enjoyable than he had anticipated. How? He asked. And why would an ambassador from where was it, Soul Society, wish to know something like this? Asks Tamari, glancing at the black-haired samurai with angry green eyes. Shigekuni told her, my interests are my own, with a strong edge to his voice. The dark blue eyes staring back at her were dangerous and ruthless, and the Jonin of Suna took a noticeable step back, her eyes widening. Taking his eyes off a terrified Tamari, the black-haired Shinigami remarked, for now I simply wish my questions to be answered so I may locate Gaara and conclude my business. Baki asked, his eyes still narrowed as he gazed at the man in front of him, and what is this business, if I may ask? Shigekuni-san, was called by a voice that was familiar. Yamamoto turned slightly and mentally widened his eyes as he took in the tall, pink-haired woman in front of him. She was equally impressive as Tamari, but slightly more so than the Suna-Jonin. Along with the top part of her clothing resembling that of the stealth force, she wore a black hakama held by a blood-red sash. Despite his reluctance, he had to acknowledge the beauty of the girl in front of him. But the way she carried herself and the big naginata by her side were what gave him that impression, not her appearance. He was a little taken aback, though, because the orange-blue jumpsuit jacket he used to wear right before he passed away was wrapped around her body as a coat. He asked her, what is it? As he turned to face Kakashi, who had also changed. It was somewhat different from what he had remembered his former sensei from, but it wasn't much like Sakura's. Sakura gave a slight nod and moved forward, staring straight into the eyes of the man in front of her. Managing your business can be challenging, she began. The reason why we are here is to help rescue Kazekage Sama from the Akatsuki before they are able to extract the Biju he holds from within his body. Tamari was furious that she would even dare to tell this stranger what had happened to her younger brother, and she glared at the pink-haired traitor. She practically lost her temper and yelled, "What the hell do you think you're doing? You have no right to tell an outsider about what happened to our village's cage." The lone, piercing gaze of the pink-haired shinobi made Tamari hesitate a little. She gestured to Kakashi, who was standing beside her, and said, "Even though you don't like it, we need as much help as we can get. Even though both I and Kakashi-sensei are strong, we cannot take on two S-class missing ninja on by ourselves." Ignoring the woman with the blonde hair, Yamamoto turned to face the pink-haired shinobi and frowned. "The Akatsuki?" he asked, turning to Baki with a faint expression of disgust. "They have taken your Kazekage?" Baki's look of pure annoyance at Sakura made it obvious that the Jonin had planned to keep the specifics of Gaara's kidnapping a secret from anyone who needed to know. He nodded as he turned back to face the black-haired Shinigami. "Hi, Kazekage Sama fought and was taken by a member of Akatsuki." It was then later confirmed that there were two Akatsuki members present at the time. As he gazed at the clad Suna Jonin in front of him, the only word that came out of his mouth was shameful. How could such a thing have happened? Did they let two missing ninjas into their village because of such poor security? Moreover, abduct their leader as well? Their actions were nothing more than a disgrace. The only explanation he could think of was that the village's security was inadequate because these Akatsuki members couldn't be on par with either Uwatch or Aizen. He wondered in the back of his mind where the village's shinobi were when the leader was abducted right in front of them. Yamamoto questioned in a chilly, contemptuous tone, "You allowed your own leader to be kidnapped? Own your own territory?" Baki's eyes narrowed as she heard the contempt in the man's voice. "He asked Ada no," he demanded. "What are you implying by that?" With absolutely no hesitation, the man said, "You're pathetic." Baki was momentarily taken aback by the man's audacity in uttering such a statement. "You dare say something like that?" Tamari asked, her rage at the man's derogatory remarks about her village and sensei erupting. "You are in the village of Sanagakure no Sato, a proud place of strong shinobi who would risk their lives to protect their Kazekage. And you dare say something like that in front of us?" With a slight shake of his head, Yamamoto gazed at each and every one of them, his gaze never faltering. "It has nothing to do with me trying to disrespect you or your village, Tamari-san." He responded, "It's nothing but cold hard facts that are being displayed to me." He turned to Baki and said, "Tell me, Baki-san. This fight against Gaara-san and the Akatsuki member, could the shinobi of Sanagakure no Sato see it?" Baki nodded, a sad, ashamed expression in his eye, to her complete disgrace and shock. "Yes," he replied honestly. "But it was a battle in the sky, one that we could not get to." As he processed the information being given to him, Yamamoto nodded, confirming his preconceived notions. "I assume then that Konohagakure no Sato and that of Kumogakure no Sato is here to assist in his recovery. No doubt in an attempt to foster goodwill and favor rather than out of any genuine interest to offer aid." At this, Sakura and Kakashi both narrowed their eyes at Yamamoto. However, they knew what the man was saying was only the truth, so they didn't do it out of resentment or hatred for what he had said about their hometown. They squinted in rage since they knew it was the truth and that Danzo, the bastard, was not helping anyone, not even the villages he claims to be allies. However, they needed to hold it in as long as possible because they would eventually be able to remove that man from the Hokage seat in the council from power. That was not something he deserved. He took that seat away from Tsunade-sama, who is much more entitled to it than he is. Baki covered his surprise with a slow nod. Without even noticing, he added the suffix to the man's name and replied, "It would appear that Konoha is indeed here to offer help. They arrived moments before you appeared, Yamamoto. Dono. Would you like to join us as we make for the Kazekage Tower? Perhaps you may wish to offer your assistance if you wish to meet with Gaara-sama." Even though Shigekuni's smirk was slight, it was a little unnerving to see it on his face. He held out a finger and pointed it straight at a building that had survived his entry into the village, saying, "While that will not be necessary, I do however have one request. I ask that you do not hold this against me, but I am someone that does not like to be spied on." A huge burst of lightning erupted from his finger before either of them could understand what he was referring to. It tore up the very ground it traveled on before detonating when it made contact with the building it was aimed at. Sakura briefly covered her face and narrowed her eyes as she watched the two figures emerge from the building right before the blast connected. She glanced in the direction they were going and noticed that Yamamoto was, for some reason, frowning at his finger. She cursed and used Shunshin as fast as she could, emerging in a cloud of smoke in front of the black blonde-haired samurai with her big naginata already in motion. She scowled a little as she saw the figures sidestep her blow and rush behind Yamamoto, aiming straight for the man's back. It happened too quickly for either of them to notice. The only indication that something had happened was the slight narrowing of Yamamoto's eyes and the way he slammed his hand over his katana handle. He swung the next instant. A huge wave of orange-red flames seemed to slam into the two figures, sending them crashing straight into the building behind them, leaving Sakura speechless. As the man sheathed his sword, the flames went out, but the people around him were still in complete shock from what they had witnessed. Without even glancing at the two who attempted to assault him, Yamamoto's eyes narrowed. His abrupt statement, "Even though that was nice of you to do," startled Sakura out of her reverie. "I do not need the help of a Konoha shinobi to protect me." Sakura gave him a slow, angry glare because he continued to think of Konoha as Danzo had made it during the previous 4 years. Although he did show it, Yamamoto was a little taken aback by her gesture of pure respect as she bowed to him, saying, "If that is what you wish, then so be it. But I highly ask you to stop disrespecting my village like that." At that, Shigekuni arched an eyebrow and said, "Oh." He moved to stand squarely in front of her, and his eyes squinted icily at her. "And why should I?" Sakura kept her head lowered because, for whatever reason, she felt that this man deserved to be treated with respect. She had a gut feeling that this man had fought terrible battles that were well worth it. As she honestly responded, "You don't have to at all, Shigekuni-san, but my village is not what you think it is, and I still have people in that village that I care dearly about. If you want to blame anyway that Konoha has been acting over the 4 years, then blame that damn council and the Hokage." Despite his lack of display, he was intrigued by the intense animosity in the girl's voice when she mentioned the council and Hokage. "Hokage? Do you mean Senju Tsunade?" he inquired. Sakura responded to him by shaking her head and saying, "No, 4 years ago, after the death of Ah." She hesitated for a second, feeling choked up at this. "My dear friend, at the hands of both the council and the now 6th Hokage, Shimura Danzo. They deem my master, Tsunade Sama, unfit to hold the title of Hokage." After a moment of surprise, Yamamoto said, "You're the student of the 5th Hokage?" Sakura stood up and gazed at the man before her with the same expressionless gaze. She tilted her head to the side and said, "Yes, my master is that of Tsunade Sama. Is that a problem?" she asked. Yamamoto shifted to the side and made his way toward a big tower that resembled sand in the distance, narrowing his eyes at the girl with the pink hair. "No," he replied. "It is not a problem that concerns me in the least." As she watched him leave, she pondered why the name Danzo made her feel so deeply angry. "I wonder," she uttered gradually. Her gaze narrowed slightly as she considered whether Danzo had done something to deserve this man's anger. They might just have an alley to take down that old bastard if her thoughts were right, which she hoped they were. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Kumo.ninja?" Hitaki Kakashi stood near his student's side and squinted his one remaining eye at the two figures still struggling to get out of the building they had been slammed into. He was upset about the disregard for his hometown, just like the other students, but he knew there was nothing he could do about it. However, based on what he overheard Yamamoto saying, it didn't seem like he detested Konohagakure or Sato in general, just some of the villagers. He could tell by the way the man had looked at them that he did not love them either, even though it was small and well concealed. He simply had to deal with it. Now that Baki-san had enlisted him as an ally, he needed to do everything in his power to ensure that they were successful in regaining Gaara. He scowled icily at the two Kumo.ninja who had managed to get themselves up, dismissing those thoughts for the moment. His words were dripping with sarcasm. "Now, since you were finally able to pick yourself up after that pathetic attempt to attack someone," I said. "What is the meaning of Shinobi of Kumogakure no Sato doing in Suna of all places?" At best, the two Kumo shinobi in front of him appeared to be Chunin. They had likely been together for a year or two. A dark-skinned kunoichi with dark amber eyes and long red hair was on the left. She had a somewhat flat chest, suggesting that she was a girl of 14 or 15, but that was just a guess on his part. Along with the Kumogakure white flak jacket, two basic yellow earrings, fishnet stockings, thigh-high boots with white soles, and a white forehead protector that she wears as a bandana, she wore a long, short-sleeved dress with frilly edges. Additionally, it appeared that she was carrying a long sword on her back, which Kakashi found somewhat impressive. The young, dark-skinned man on the right had short, spiky, white hair and dark eyes that were highlighted by upward curving lines from the corners. His dark attire included a black forehead protector, Kumogakure shin guards, red bandage handguards, and an overlong shirt with a hood. His expression appeared to be thoughtful, as if he were sucking on a lollipop while deep in thought. Like the young woman at his side, he also carried a long sword on his back. With murderous intent in her eyes, the girl with the dark skin glared at him. She spat bitterly, "I don't have to answer to a damn Konoha dog." Kakashi's right hand crept closer to his katana's handle as his eyes narrowed. To be honest, he never liked or trusted Kumogakure no Sato. They were nothing more than cowards who used deceitful means to achieve their goals, in his opinion. When caught doing what they are doing, they will vehemently deny any involvement and claim that they had nothing to do with the captured ninja. It had previously occurred when he was still a baby, involving Uzumaki Kushina, the wife of his sensei, who took on the role of his mother when he truly had no one. Years later, they made another unsuccessful attempt to abduct Hinata Hyuga, the heir to the Hyuga line. He turns to see Baki glaring at him after his hand was abruptly caught. Trying to be as professional as possible, he asked, "What is the meaning of this Baki-san? Why are there Kumo-ninja here?" The half-covered Jonin of Suna lets go of the sliver-haired one's arm, turns on his heel, and goes straight behind the black-haired Shinigami's. His icy eyes returned to the Cyclops, and he paused, saying, "It is really none of your business, Hitaki-san. We asked for their help, it's just something that simple." "And pray tell why that is?" Kakashi asked, his voice cold, after straightening up and glaring at the man. "You asked for Konoha's help. So what is the reason why you would ask for their help when you have ours?" he said. "It's simple, according to Baki. We don't trust you or Konohagakure no Sato. To help us and look after to see if you would do anything to cause harm to the village of Suna, I asked for their help in bringing back our cage." At that, Kakashi gave a mental growl, but his expression remained as expressionless as ever. What was the reason why they attacked Yamamoto-san? He inquired. There was no reason to do so. Despite feeling a tiny bit of killer intent seeping from Kakashi's body, Baki said, "Even though he wants to help us, we don't trust him either. Kumo has been asked to help to bring back Gara-sama, along with watching over you and your traitorous student, along with now that of Yamamoto-san." Tamari and Yamamoto were walking side by side up ahead, neither of them saying anything to the other. Tamari whispered, "I apologize Yamamoto-san," so that only the young Shinigami could hear. Without even looking at the girl who was walking beside him, Yamamoto questioned, "And why are you apologizing to me?" "I'm sorry for the trouble both Konoha and Kumo may have caused you," replied the Jonin with blonde hair. "Kumo is only here on orders from their Raikage to help bring back my brother from what I can see. But like you said, I can along tell that Konoha is only here for their only selfish gains." "And why is that I might ask?" With a slightly chipped tone, Tamari scoffed, feeling the same rage that had been building inside her for Konoha's murder of her brother's only friend. "Konoha has fallen in the past few years. According to what I can remember, a ninja, Uchiha Sasuke actually abandoned Konoha in favor of one of Konoha's S-class missing ninja. Uzumaki Naruto, a person my brother still to this day sees as a dear friend, was a part of the team sent to retrieve the Uchiha and ended up failing in the process. It was because of this that Konoha had him killed, twisting the reality of things." Nodded Yamamoto. "Pardon me for asking a question I have no business to knowing, but why does Suna remain an ally of Konoha if the relationship is less than favorable? Konoha's Hokage, Shimura Danzo, has applied a threat of war should we negate the treaties we have with them. Even a neutral stance will have them attack us. Right now, Suna doesn't have the military might to defend against the combined forces of Konoha right now," Tamari concluded. Yamamoto noticed the girl's tone and said, "You seem a bit confident for some reason, why is that?" "You heard that," Tamari said with a slight smirk, "but to answer your question, it's that slowly but surely, Konoha is losing power. The other four nations have been planning for the last 2 years to attack them, to make sure they pay for the pain they had caused over the year ever since they killed their Jinchuriki 4 years ago." At that, Yamamoto scowled. If she was right, it would not be long before 4 elemental nations attacked Konohagakure no Sato and wiped it out of the face of the planet. He had a duty to defend Konoha from any danger that stood in its way as well, if his king's statements were accurate. However, he had to gain more knowledge about this attack before he could actually launch his attack on Konoha and eliminate everyone his king desired dead. However, he had to take care of this minor matter first, saving Gaara and ensuring that the Akatsuki who had abducted him was destroyed from the cycle of rebirth itself. He laughed a little darkly at it, not even realizing that it made Tamari recoil in terror. Distance from Sanagakure no Sato in miles unknown place. On a silhouette, ripple. Patterned eyes came to life. It was perched on a spooky statue's finger. 4 of the statue's 9 eyes were open. It made a twisted grimace, its spiked teeth bared. On each of the other fingers, 7 more silhouettes emerged. A figure with ripple, Patterned eyes snapped his attention to each of them, his eyes narrowing into cold, tight slits as he examined each of the individuals who had come into view. He said icily, "Where are Sasori and Deidara? What is causing them to appear before us?" One figure yelled, "Huh? Those damn idiots probably couldn't even handle one Jinchuriki," with a voice that was nothing but pure madness. This figure, who had amethyst eyes and an unusual scythe with 3 blades on his back, said, "You should have sent me. I would have loved sacrificing it to that of Lord Jashin, Sama." The voice echoed through the dark room, "Who's an idiot, Hidan? Do you wish to die for making me angry?" The statue was approached by 2 figures. The first person to respond was enormous, a giant of a man with a wooden, expressionless face. Like an animal that would crawl or walk on all fours, he approached the enormous statue with his back hunched, standing only a foot or 2 above the other figure. The second one was a little slender. His long blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and a mass of hair obscured his left eye. The blonde exclaimed, "Yeah, Hidan. He was easy, yeah. A real weakling with nothing special about him other than that sand of his," as the shorter one threw a bloody and bruised body into the circle where the Akatsuki members were assembled. The other figure said icily, utterly disregarding the cries of the one known as Hidan, "Quiet, Deidara. We have no time for you to be arguing with nothing more than a weakling." He bowed to the person with the ripple patterned eyes, who was clearly the group leader. Quickly following suit, the now identified Deidara said, "Leader Sama, we have returned with the Ichibi no Tanuki, Shukaku." Akatsuki, the criminal organization's leader, gave this a nod. "So you have," he said in response. "Quickly, we must begin the ritual." The ground in front of them abruptly changed as if it were turning into some kind of mud before the man could start. Because it looked like a huge Venus flytrap, the image briefly blurred before clearing to reveal a man or some other kind of creature. The man-creature appeared to be solid black on one side and white on the other. It appears that the two are a synthesis of yin and yang. "I have important news for ya, leader Sama." "What is it, Zetsu? I've seen 2 teams coming toward our location, but there's one figure that seems to be shinobi of neither Konoha nor Kumo." The black side spoke up, its voice as unsettling as an insect scuttling on the ground. "It seems Sanagakure no Sato have sent for reinforcements to help them rescue their lost leader." A female figure cast a sidelong glance at the leader, her eyes gray. As she gazed at the man by her side, she said in an emotionless voice, "If what Zetsu says is true, leader Sama, then we must do something before they reach here. If either of those teams arrives here before the ritual is finished, then they could possibly ruin everything." The leader briefly closed his eyes and reviewed all he had heard from his fellows. Yes, he was aware that the Suna Ninja had summoned Konoha and Kumo for assistance from the moment they had arrived in Suna. However, for some reason, this other figure that materialized before them all was a little unnerving to him. Despite his impressive power, he was confident that he could defeat him if he lived long enough. This was not to say that he was afraid of it. The fact that he could sense deep down that this man was still concealing a great deal of power from his eyes bothered him a little. Whoever this man is, he was much more than he or the others could currently seem to measure. At first glance, he appears to be just another weak samurai trying to be strong in a world that doesn't belong to him. But that was just a lie. It seemed as though he was concealing his influence or simply didn't give a damn about what people thought of him. Remembering how difficult it was to keep the man from discovering both Deidara and Sasori, his rippled eyes narrowed slightly. He truly had no idea how long he would be able to keep him at bay if he hadn't given up searching. He continued to look at Zetsu, wanting to share more of what he had discovered with him. Zetsu nodded as he saw his leader's expressions and went on. The white one remarked, "This figure is a little unsettling from what I've seen from him." A second figure on one of the big fingers gazed at him with tiny, bloodlust-filled blue eyes. With a dark chuckle, he gripped the big covered broadsword in his right hand and asked, "What do you mean by that, Hazetsu? To me, it sounds like you're scared of this man." The others froze, staring at the man with the yin-yang symbol with a hint of surprise on their faces as he said, "As a matter of fact, Kisame, I really am." Another figure, his blood-red eyes turning to the man on the ground in front of them, said, "And why is that, Zetsu? What has he done to make you feel this way?" "We're good at what we do." The dark side of Zetsu responded, "But against this man, none of that seemed to matter. Even when the shinobi around me could not tell I was around, he on the other hand did. The only reason I was able to escape was because it seems that he was distracted by something." With a nod, the leader turned to face Sasori's hunchback figure. "Is the seal you attached to the entrance working?" he inquired. "Will it hold them long enough for us to finish the ritual?" Sasori gave a bow. "Yes, leader Sama." The seal I placed around the area of where we currently are will hold. It is a matter you need not concern yourself with." The leader with the rippled eyes looked at the distant blood-red figure and nodded. "Cancel out the plan we set out before," he instructed. "I want both you, Itachi and Kisame, to meet these teams before they reach here. Hold them off as long as you can. If you think you can do it, then kill them, all of them." The aforementioned Akatsuki members acknowledged with curt nods and vanished. The Akatsuki members were standing on a statue that came to life when the leader raised his hands. The statue's hands, each bearing a kanji for its corresponding ring, started to glow with a green, unsettling light. With his hands in a ram seal, the figure roared, "Funijutsu. Genryu Kyufujin. Sealing technique. Phantom Dragon's 9 consuming seals." From his mouth, after a single roar, 9 dragon-shaped streams of chakra burst from the enormous statue's gaping maw and entered Gaara's unconscious state. Gaara started to thrash and scream as soon as the streams of chakra touched the incapacitated Jinchuriki, even though his body started to float in front of the statue. The leader of Sanagakure no Sato appeared to be having his soul stolen as a frothy, red substance started to flow from Gaara's mouth and eyes and into the statue's waiting maw. "Quickly," thought the Akatsuki organization's leader. "I'm uneasy about this new character Zetsu tells me about. He will require observation. There is no Sato a few miles from Sanagakure. Horrible." When Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto passed through the trees of a distant forest a few miles from Sanagakure no Sato, his face remained as expressionless as ever. However, he was still processing the events of the attack by those Kumo ninja, so he was a little angry inside. He could still feel the intense spiritual pressure he always experienced prior to his death, so it wasn't that he had lost his ability to do anything. Even now, in the present, he felt proud of his increased power and was unable to stop for a moment. Apparently taking a moment to appreciate his accomplishments over the few thousand years he had been fortunate enough to serve under his king, he lifted his right fist slightly and held it close to his face. He had lost his life as a result of this lesson, but he had known from the start when he was Shigekunia that strength is not something that can be taken or given to you. He and Ryujin Jaka, his Zanpakuto, had trained for hundreds of years to master their power and even longer to master his Bankai's immense power. At that moment, he mentally shook his head. The sudden ideas that entered his head were those of a Jinchuriki. In addition to Uzumaki Naruto's power, he possessed his own, that of Kyuubi no Yoko, the beast that destroyed a significant portion of Konohagakure no Sato in this dimension 17 years ago. They were both given a second chance at life, one in which they would not be subjected to hatred or despised by others simply because of their previous weakness. He was no longer Kyuubi no Yoko, instead, he was a part of his soul as his Zanpakuto spirit, the formidable ancient flame. Type Zanpakuto. Both of them had lived their entire lives in Soul Society, but they still needed to complete one more task before they could finally rest as their king had decreed they should. He couldn't help but smirk when he lowered his right hand. Perhaps his king had given him a secret reason to act in this way. After many years of service, this was likely an opportunity for him to have as much fun as possible and use his Shikai to its fullest without fear of reducing his surroundings to a raging conflagration of ashes and his enemies' appalled cries. He could actually see his old friend doing something similar for him, though perhaps he was just looking a little too closely. He put those ideas aside for the time being and concentrated on the issue that had been troubling him since he had left Sanagakure no Sato. There was no denying that his power was the same as it had been before he left, but for some reason it felt unmanaged. He scowled at that. He had forgotten about his inability to manage his spiritual pressure because it had happened so long ago. Shigekuni ponders this for a while, attempting to understand why his king refused to grant him the authority he possessed in this body prior to his demise. Really, it was a bit annoying, like a tiny tick that kept bothering a dog that sat next to you. Unless, he briefly shook his head in an attempt to clear his mind of the ideas that were currently bothering him. The Spirit King was denying him complete control over his Ryotsu because he was giving him the ability to become even more powerful, if what his soul was telling him was accurate. There was no way to know how much stronger he could get beyond his peak strength if that were the case, and he trained as diligently as he did in this dimension. He twisted his frown into a tiny, dark smirk, which was completely unusual for him to do. However, he was unable to resist. If this were the case, he would have had no choice but to enjoy the fun he would have in this dimension. His king had given him everything for the purpose, which he intended to carry out with all the authority that had been bestowed upon him over the years. However, he was still unable to stop mentally frowning at something, a minor issue that still bothered him. Why, of all things, would his king want him to defend Konohagakure without Sato? Was Uzumaki Naruto the same village that had put him to death in his former life? It sounded almost silly of him to even consider doing such a thing to a village that had murdered him. He must have had a reason for wanting him to do this, or he may have simply wanted him to mend fences with the village and its residents. Could he actually do that, though? Could he truly defend those who had wiped him out like a dog? He wanted nothing more than to burn them all to ashes in a dark, twisted part of his soul. His face took the shape of a scowl that was mocking a child, and his dark blue eyes twisted in a tight frown. He wasn't some fucking hollow, a monster who only wanted to exact revenge and murder those who had wronged him in a past life. In a small part of his heart, he hated the people who had killed him because he posed a threat, but that didn't mean he could hate the entire village. That was something he couldn't lie about. Hitaki Kakashi and Haruno Sakura, two of his former teammates, appeared to have suffered far more serious injuries than he had anticipated at the time of his passing. The woman with the pink hair had completely changed from what he remembered about her in both appearance and personality. In any case, they needed to demonstrate to him through his behavior that they truly felt regret for what they had done to him all those years ago. He was never as verbal as the others. If something truly didn't strike him, he used Ryujin Jaka's words to respond to his inquiries. Just wait for them to show him that, for some strange reason, he sensed that neither of them would let him down as he had anticipated. If what his king had told him was accurate, he had to ensure that Danzo was killed by his blade when he finally made it to Konohagakure no Sado. According to what he had heard, that man was a coward who used the people he had loved to inflict further suffering on him before he passed away. On his side, a relaxed voice said, "Sorry about my teammates attacking you back there, Yamamoto-san." The former Sotecho of the Gotei 13 turned slightly to face the source, and he gazed at the man beside him with interest. "It means nothing," he replied, turning back to the object he had been focusing on before being sidetracked. A slight frown crossed the man's face, but he dismissed it as an act of disrespect. "No matter, but I would still like you to know that they will never do something like that again." The individual replied, "It's just that Suna asked us to help them with the problems that has risen due to their cage being kidnapped. Another reason is that our Raikage told them to attack anything that was seen as a threat to that of Sanagakure no Sato." "Who are you?" He introduced himself as a Jonin, level shinobi from Kumogakure, and the right hand man of the 4th Raikage. "Sama." The man grinned and said, "My name is Darui." A rather tall, dark, skinned man with a slightly bulbous nose, a lazy expression in his eyes, and shaggy, white hair that obscured his left eye, is the recently discovered Darui. He wore a Kumogakure Shinobi's 1 strap over .1 shoulder flak jacket, loose fitting pants, and a high collared, sleeveless uniform. He also had bandages on his wrists. Additionally, he had stylized symbols for lighting and water, which represent the nature affinities of his chakra, tattooed on his left shoulder and right shoulder, respectively. He strapped a wide, foldable sword that resembled a cleaver to his back. The two who had attacked Yamamoto frowned angrily as a young woman standing next to Darui glared at them. She was a tall, fair-skinned woman who appeared to have a stoic, distant expression on her face most of the time. Her straight, blonde hair, which was cut in an asymmetrical bob style with the front bangs reaching her shoulders, framed her face, and her eyes were blue. With mesh armor underneath, short red handguards, high boots, and what looks to be a modified Kumogakure flak jacket that only covers her stomach, akin to a girdle, she wore a very low dot-cut outfit that showed off her ample cleavage. In addition, she had a tanto strapped to her lower back horizontally. The young woman with light blonde hair called out to her two teammates, "Omoi, Karui. What you did almost caused problems with an unknown land, so no cool." At that, Omoi frowns and turns to face Yamamoto with a faint expression of embarrassment. "Sorry about that, Yamamoto-san." He offered an apology. "From the way you entered the village, I thought you were an enemy that was planning on attacking it." Karui, the girl to his left, scowls somewhat angrily at the black-haired samurai, furious that he was able to knock her away as if she were a fly. She narrowed her amber eyes and snapped, "Well, maybe the baka should learn how to enter a village without destroying a part of its wall." She was glancing at his back. "Baka, just what kind of ninja are you?" Yamamoto said, "That's the point," with a strong edge in his voice. However, the dark-skinned girl glared at him even more because he was still staring at her. "I'm not some weak ninja child. On the other hand, I am a person that follows through with his pride and honor, and that of my blade." "Don't you dare call me weak, you bastard," snarled Karui in response, "and I am not a child." "Compared to me, yes you are," Shigekuni replied. "The way you're acting doesn't give you the right to even say you're an adult." The red-haired woman laughed, mockingly, "Just because I don't follow that stupid method you samurai have? In the shinobi world, something like that would get you killed." "No, Yamamoto replied, his eyes dark and taut for the first time as he gazed at the girl. But if you don't stay silent, then you just might end up dead here and now. When the pressure seemed to slam into her entire body, Karui froze, her eyes widening slightly. However, it vanished as soon as it arrived, leaving her to stumble a little on the next branch she landed on. When Darui noticed this, he scowled and looked back at Yamamoto's bare back. This man in front of him was far more powerful than he realized. If his suspicions were correct, he was certain that he needed to inform his boss about this because, if not examined first, the black-haired samurai in front of him would cause issues down the road. Since he had never heard of a samurai with such low chakra being this powerful, the dark-skinned Jonin simply hoped that they could find something on this man. Yamamoto said, "Tell me, Kumo.Ninja, what do you think of Konoha Ninja?" The two lone members of Team 7 froze, frowning deeply. Omoi's eyes were curious as he gazed at the samurai with the black hair. And why would you ask something like that? Just answer the question. The Kumo.Ninja's answer to the question came from Tamari, who was present. She gave him an honest response. "I really can't answer that for you, Yamamoto.san, she said. She sighed slightly, ignoring Sakura's icy stare. "Well, there was a time when I could trust a Konoha.Nin with my life, or at least somewhere along those lines, but the trust, as I told you before, has dwindled quite a bit." She indicated Sakura and Kakashi. "Really, the only people I'd even gladly work with are the Konoha 9, she said. "These two are not included into that." "And why is that?" inquired Yamamoto. "As I told you," explained Tamari, "Konoha's relations with the rest of the 5 great shinobi nations have deteriorated quite a bit. 4 years ago it began with the execution of their Jinchuriki." A woman in her later years said, "That's not all. With no more alliances with the other villages, Konoha began to use force to maintain alliances. Since Konoha has the largest number of shinobi in their ranks and because they were the most untouched throughout the Third Shinobi World War through the Yondaime Hokage, there was nothing much that the other villages could do, save for sparking another war. Not only that, but Danzo has taken the mantle of Hokage after Tsunade Senju collapsed from mental stress 4 years ago. That's enough." Sakura glared icily at each of them, causing the others to pause what they were about to say. "Yes, Konoha has done a lot of bad things since that man has been appointed to Hokage, but I will not stand here and hear you talk done about my village this way." Trying to push the girl with the pink hair as much as she could, Karui smirked at her and asked, "Are you mad, Konoha.Dog? Everything they have said is nothing but the truth. Your village has fallen, being nothing more than a scum of a village that doesn't even deserve to be on the face of the earth after what you did to you Jinchuriki." When the dark-skinned woman felt Sakura's Naginata's long, massive blade at her throat, she was about to say something else but stopped. Karui cautiously turned her head and saw the emerald-eyed girl staring at her with a chilly glare. Given how he observed the Kumo.Ninja trembling slightly, Yamamoto's bloodlust for her was, to put it mildly, impressive. Therefore, he believed that what Danzo had been doing for the past 4 years was something they didn't like. He was able to determine whether or not they were loyal to the man in this way, but based on his observations, he was certain that they were not. Kakashi, who was far more adept at controlling his rage than his pupil, commanded, "Stand down, Sakura." He looks at the samurai with the black hair. The black-haired samurai stared at the silver-haired Jonin for a minute, as if he were testing him, but then turned back to face him. "Konoha has done some bad things over the years as they have said, but I swear to you Yamamoto.san that nothing will happen that would expect you to think we want you dead or something?" he asked. The group was forced to disperse as they landed in the clear after being alerted to a hail of shuriken that came flying from the right as a small clearing appeared in the horizon. Yamamoto appeared on the ground ahead of the others and scowled at the two individuals in front of him. His spiritual pressure was starting to increase for an odd reason, as if it were telling him that the two people in front of him were going to be killed. However, he was already aware that the two people in front of them were undoubtedly part of Akatsuki, the group his king had ordered him to dismantle. His face broke into a tiny smirk as his body began to slowly churn with bloodlust. The stark picture of the Sharingan in full view was a clue that the first person on the right was unquestionably Uchiha Itachi. His jet black hair was pulled back in a low ponytail that reached his shoulder blades using red elastic. The long, sharp tears were under his eyes. With his forehead protector scratched at the top, he was wearing the Akatsuki's long black-red cloak. Sakura almost felt that he was taking what was in front of him very seriously because of the sternness of his gaze. Of all the shinobi standing in the clear, the one on Itachi's side was the tallest, most muscular. His pale, blue skin, small, round, white eyes, real gills on his shoulders, and sharp Like triangular teeth give him a recognizable shark. Like appearance. He had his hair styled like a shark fin. He had dark, purple nail polish on his fingers and a big broadsword wrapped in bandages on his shoulders. Although most of the shinobi before him were shivered by his bloodlust filled grin, Genri Usai was not impressed by the way he was betraying his murderous intent. Recalling what Jiraiya Sama had said to her a year after Naruto's passing, Sakura scowled at the two in front of them. These two jerks had pursued the blonde ninja in an attempt to apprehend him, bring him back to their hiding place, and remove the Kyuubi no Yoko from his body while they were looking for Lady Tsunade. She would have no doubt that they would have Kyuubi in their grasp by now if the white-haired Sannin hadn't appeared before they could capture Naruto. For a moment, she scowled pitifully, considering that perhaps they ought to have taken Naruto. Even though it was wrong of her to think such a thing, it would have been preferable to dying knowing that his entire village had betrayed him. Darui's eyes narrowed and he shifted slightly, holding onto the big blade on his back with his right hand. He wasn't going to let himself make any mistakes that would result in his and his team's deaths because any shinobi of this era knew these two before them. He narrowed his eyes as he turned to face the black-haired samurai who was staring at the two S-class shinobi with a chilly, bloodlustful expression on his face. Others would be wary of the two samurai in front of them, but the one in front of him didn't even appear concerned. In fact, it seemed like he was growing bored the longer he stood there. His appearance was almost unnerving. How strong could he be to appear so composed in front of this individual? The girl with the short blonde hair yelled, "Darui! Senpai!" Her eyes narrowed at the two criminals in front of them, her right hand clenched tightly on her tanto. "Those two are Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame. What do you want us to do?" The dark-skinned man yelled, "Samui," keeping his gaze fixed on the two men in front of them. "Can you read their chakra? To tell how high they are?" The woman with the short blonde hair nodded and briefly closed her eyes to feel out the two in front of her. With rapid concentration, she raised her hands in a ram's seal. After a moment, she opened her eyes, displaying an unusual expression of utter shock. "Uchiha Itachi's levels are impressive, just as much as your senpai," she concluded, "but Kisame seems to have an insane amount of chakra within his body, almost on the level of B-sensei." With her blade in both hands, Karui swore. "Damn it," she exclaimed as she moved in closer, watching for any movements the two might make. "Who would have thought we would meet these two of all people? This is going to be harder than I first thought." Omoi, who was also holding his katana, remarked, "No doubt about that." He would have continued, but he stopped when he saw Itachi step forward. "I just hope we don't make a mistake, which will end up with us killed, and then our families will be sad." With a curse, Temari's eyes narrowed into slits as she observed their red, clouded cloaks. She turns on both of the big fans, sending a strong windstorm that split the earth beneath her. She roared out in rage, gathering a good deal of chakra towards her fans. She swung her body like a top, releasing two enormous waves of cutting wind with each swing. Futon. Keiskiri no Jutsu, wind release. Wind cutter technique, she exclaimed. As the blades of wind swept across the area toward the two Akatsuki members at remarkable speeds, the ground in front of her exploded and was sliced to pieces. Both Akatsuki members remained motionless, their faces nearly bored as they gazed at the approaching elemental ninjutsu. With her eyes narrowed into slits, the blonde Suna ninja watched the two to see if they would move. Her heart was telling her that even though they weren't the ones who had taken her brother, she still wanted them to suffer. She only wanted to make sure she did some damage to them before they could attack, and it didn't matter if she didn't cut them to pieces. However, it didn't appear that they were indifferent to her jutsu or that they didn't believe it could hurt them. Her eyes widened as she saw the blue Akatsuki member vanish from his position, but she still growled, "What the hell are they doing?" Then, with a big, blood-thirsty smile on his face and a big, water-soaked sword in his hands, he materialized in front of her Keiskiri no Jutsu. With the bloodlust still leaking from his voice, Kisame finally said, "A technique like this won't work on either of us." The powerful swing came to an end, sending a powerful shockwave that tore the ground from beneath where the jutsu exploded. "So, if it's not a problem, care to take this back?" Suddenly, a large area of the area where Kisame was covered by a wave of water. With a curse, Tamari and the others leapt to avoid the unexpected water surge. Their eyes enlarge as they look down and see Yamamoto standing exactly where he was, wearing the same expression that he had when they first hit the ground. Kaori exclaimed, "What the hell do you think you're doing, dumbass? Get out of the way before you're killed." Looking at the rushing wave of water that was only inches from hitting his body, the black-haired Shinigami finally said, "Killed? Ridiculous for you even to suggest something like that is possible." He remained motionless, but what appeared to be a powerful wave of flames suddenly burst from his body, turning the water into nothing but hot vapor. Wata. Samui watched in disbelief. A look covering her face that was unusual for her. Was that flames? With a slightly apprehensive expression on his face, Omoi turned to face the black-haired samurai and asked, "How is that possible? I didn't see a single hand seal. Is he just too fast for us to see?" The elderly elder of Sanagakure no Sato squinted, nearly disbelieving what she was witnessing. "It's not that you didn't see any hand seal, child." Looking at her, Karui wondered where the elderly woman was taking this. She questioned, "What do you mean? Are you trying to say he didn't use any hand seals?" "That's exactly what she's saying." Team Samui turned to face the dark-skinned Jonin, and they were all taken aback by the solemn look on his face. They weren't accustomed to seeing it because Darui had always been portrayed as being lethargic. However, he was acting more solemnly than they had ever seen him before, which made them uneasy. Glancing back down at Yamamoto, they saw the same posture and stance that they had grown accustomed to seeing him in. This man in front of them was incredibly powerful. There was no question about it anymore. All they had to do was watch where this would take them. After landing, they prepared to wait for any movement from the two Akatsuki members. When the water subsided, they were all taken aback to witness Sakura Haruno and the shark-like Akatsuki member slicing blades. In an attempt to push Kisame back as hard as she could, the girl with the pink hair had her hands clenched tightly on the long handle of her naginata. It seemed as though the tall, shark-like man was almost playing with her, but nothing seems to be working. Sakura's eyes widened and she leapt back just in time to keep her head from hitting the ground as he smirked at her and positioned his large blade to cut it off her shoulders. As the pink-haired shinobi's body was blasted throughout the space, her eyes narrowed in hatred and she cursed. She used her right hand to release Kai Shoken before gathering a remarkable quantity of chakra in her naginata. "Suia! Oryujin, water! Break dragon circle," she exclaimed, forming a long arc with her big blade. A few dragons of pure water rushed at him at great speed, and Kisame took a step back in surprise, staring straight ahead. "I must say, that girl is far more surprising than that Suna girl," he said with a slight smirk as he swung his large blade directly at the dragons, shattering them on contact and absorbing the chakra that created them. He appeared in front of Sakura and swung down at her, blurring forward as she used something of that level without using a single hand seal. Sakura swallowed a curse, feeling stupid for losing her opponent's attention in such a way. The strength of the blow caused the ground to crack beneath her as she clenched her body and raised Kai Shoken. She looked up, doing everything she could to keep the man back as long as she could. She was aware of the strength of these Akatsuki members even before she arrived here, but she was unaware of their full extent. She held on as long as she could, even though she could feel her knees getting weaker. Kisame abruptly said, "I must say, girl," pressing down on her while exerting additional force. "I never thought I would see someone being able to use that Kenjutsu style." Sakura couldn't help but grin in spite of the circumstances. "Why so surprised?" she asked him, in a somewhat derisive manner. "Are you surprised that a girl of all things could use it?" Sakura's eyes widened at the sudden chance of tactics and she let out a painful curse as Kisame gave her a dark smile before kicking out. He responded, "Not really, girl," and he placed his blade on his shoulders. He was about to say something else when a lightning.in-fused blade sliced into his back, causing him to curse in agony. "It's just that you seem to not have mastered it as it should." He swung and twisted, crashing into the person, sending them into a shower of water and light. Kakashi was furious that this bastard had managed to injure his student in front of him, and he glared at the man. He remarked, "You talk too much," as he continued to press down with his blade covered in lighting. "In a battle between shinobi, you should never allow yourself to drop your guard." From the rear, a chilly voice said, "You should tell yourself that as well, Kakashi." When the sliver-haired Jonin was caught off guard, his eyes widened in surprise and he cursed. In an attempt to block the blow that was headed for Kisame's face, he slammed a kick into his body and spun around with a strong swing. He was kicked squarely in the face because he was not quick enough. He screamed in agony as his body shot across the room before colliding with a tree. His lone eyes narrowed, and he kicked up with his hands before disappearing. A moment later, he was right behind Itachi, who was still in the air. In an instant, his katana covered in lightning sliced through the air, sending an electric shock straight to the Sharingan wielder, severing his head. Before the blade could sever the black-haired shinobi in two at the waist, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. After a moment, he emerged beneath Kakashi's protection and used an axe kick to split the man's back in two. The silver-haired Jonin cursed, aware that the air being released from the kick would break his back if he didn't act quickly. Without hesitation, he leapt into the kick, bracing his body as it struck his back, sending him flying into the ground and creating a large trench. Itachi straightened up and gazed at Sakura and the scowling Kakashi with the same expression. "Very impressive, Hitaki Kakashi," he said in approval. "It seems over the 4 years since Naruto Kun's death, you have increased your capabilities to a larger level than I would have thought." Keeping his katana by his side, Kakashi stood up. He was clenching his fist around his blade, and his eye was narrowed into a slit. Darkly, he said, taking off his headband from his Sharingan eye, "I think I'm going to decline a compliment from you, Uchiha Itachi." From that point on, he realized that he could not hold back. If he did, he would undoubtedly die regardless. With the same lustful grin on his face, Kisame stepped at Itachi's side and gazed at the two in front of him with interest. "They're pretty impressive, huh, Itachi?" he said. "Both of their skills in Kenjutsu is pretty impressive, but it's really nothing that I can't handle." Sakura spat out, "Bastard," as she narrowed her one eye at him, enraged by the mocking tone in his voice. "Underestimating us is going to get you dead." The shark man said, "I highly doubt that, little girl." Itachi asked, looking at the two in front of him with the same expression, "You seem mad about something. I wonder what it is." "If it wasn't for you," Sakura snarled as she charged forward, determined to exterminate the man in front of her. As she swung downward, she let out a lot of water. "Then your damn brother would have never betrayed Konoha, and Naruto would not have been killed," she exclaimed. Kisame chuckled and struck out, quickly absorbing the chakra in the water with the large blade in his hands. He swung his big blade straight at Sakura's shoulder, saying, "You made a mistake at coming here, Pinky," before she could react. Sakura let out a cry of agony as she felt the big blade shave into the back of her right shoulder. She leapt back and landed beside her sensei, kneeling and giving the man in front of them a vile glare. "Samahata, Sharkskin," she said. "One of the 7 swordsman's blades, able to take chakra from its enemies and use it as its own. You seem a bit knowledgeable. At least you seem to know what you're dealing with," Kisame said with a dark smile that was made darker by his teeth. "It's a pity though, you just can't seem to tell that you're about to die. You either shark face." Kisame blocked the wind. Enhanced kunai that were about to pierce his chest by swinging Samahata in front of his body. As Tamari and Chio approached, he saw that they were both tense and prepared to fight at any time. "It seems more of you wish to die," he stated. Sakura asked, keeping her gaze fixed on the two in front of her, "What are you two doing here? I thought you would have left with the Kumo ninja." Chio looked at the girl with the pink hair with a look of admiration and grinned a little. Her response was, "We couldn't just leave you to deal with this. We sent the Kumo team in front of us to be able to retrieve Gaara while we deal with these two before us." Tamari said, "If they're here before us." She was tense with anxiety, but she was careful not to let the two in front of her weaken her defenses. "Then I have no doubt that they have started to extract Shukaku from my brother." Kakashi raised his eyebrows. "That seems possible," he replied. "It could tell us why these two are in front of us. But I would have thought they would have used some type of clone to hold us, but this seemed like the real deal." He widened his gaze. "What is the reason why the both of you would show yourself before us like this?" "Very good, Kakashi," Itachi replied. "The reason on why we are here are not because of any of you. But we wanted to know of the man behind you." After a brief pause, Kakashi and the others turned to see Yamamoto approaching them with a chilly expression on his face. The fact that the area surrounding him was disintegrating and floating into the air before turning into nothing more than things they couldn't see startled them a little. Though it didn't seem to be aimed at them, they could feel a lot of pressure surrounding them. They turned to look at Itachi and Kisame, and were startled to see that the two appeared to be having difficulty standing in front of them. Although they were doing a good job of hiding it, they were unable to cover up the perspiration that was accumulating on their foreheads. Yamamoto stepped alongside the silver-haired Jonin and looked at him with his icy dark blue eyes. "Leave now," he insisted. "This is not your mission. You must catch up with the Kumo shinobi and help bring back Gaara." Sakura's single eye grew wide as she began to deduce the man's plan. Her eye narrowed in a narrow slit as she asked, "Are you planning on fighting these two by yourself?" "No, I will not leave just because you tell me." Shigekuni gave her a fierce look, feeling insulted that she would even have the audacity to say such a thing to him. However, he was curious as to why he felt so much hatred emanating from her body. He shook his head and said, "And if you do stay, what is the reason on why you want to fight these two so badly? No, what is the reason why you want Uchiha-san's head?" "If I kill Itachi here and now," the pink-haired girl said with a dark growl, "I can use his head to bring out Uchiha Sasuke." The Shinigami with the black hair questioned, "And why do you want that?" "It's simple, I want revenge," she responded, Sasuke wants to kill Itachi. I want to kill him for what he did to our teammate 4 years ago. Although he didn't express it, Yamamoto hesitated for a second, somewhat taken aback by what he heard emerge from the pink-haired girl's mouth. He had never imagined that she would say those words. Perhaps, in the 4 years since he had passed away, the girl in front of him had truly cared enough about him to exact revenge. That made him smirk. Perhaps this girl was more unexpected than he had anticipated. In any case, he wasn't going to let her stand in his way when his mission was about to start, even though she surprised him. He assured her, "You'll soon get your revenge on Uchiha Sasuke. Right now, you have a mission to complete. These two, I will deal with them myself." Sheathing his katana on his back and shielding his eye, Kakashi took a step forward. "He's right, Sakura." "What?" His eyes narrowed, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know how you feel, Sakura, but we do have a mission to completely before we allow our personal feelings to get into this. It will come to you, Sakura, but this just isn't the time," Kakashi said with a slight sigh. The elderly woman moved forward, staring at the girl with the pink hair with a furrowed brow. She said, "We have to leave now, Sakura. Even though I don't know the reason, that revenge you want will come sooner than you think." Yamamoto's dark blue eyes narrowed as he gazed at the two in front of him and gave the order, "Leave now." Kakashi nodded, feeling compelled to do as this man instructed him. "When you get to where the Kumo team is now, Kakashi, I want you to take over and do everything you can to take back Gaara. Sakura, Lady Chiyo, and Tamari will provide as backup if you meet any other enemies. If you're able to, then kill them, all of them." "Hi!" they exclaimed, feeling the same rising sensation in their chest as Kakashi. "Then leave now," they said, disappearing as fast as they could and moving toward a wide pathway they could make out in the distance. Sakura turned back to see Yamamoto standing in front of the two Akatsuki members, his eyes unfrightened. In an attempt to level the playing field with the others she had seen, she wanted to know just how strong he was. It was strange, to be honest. She also wanted to know why she was feeling a little anxious for him. She shook her head, concentrating on the task at hand. The member of Akatsuki that resembled a blue shark laughed in the distance before they left. He slammed his hands together and gathered a lot of chakra in his mouth. "Oh," he said. "Do you really think we would allow you to escape? Our orders were to kill all of you, just not one of you." He felt a tremendous force slam into his chest, stopping him before he could launch a large number of compressed balls of water at the four. He let out a cry of excruciating pain as his body shot across the room and collided with several trees in the forest just yards from where he had been standing just a moment before. Before the black-haired Shinigami even moved to attack his partner, Itachi's eyes widened for the first time. He turned to face Yamamoto, who was standing there with his sheathed sword in his left hand, and he was on full guard this time. He was staring at the two of them with narrowed eyes, as if they were only mere children. He said, "How foolish," with a dark edge. "Tell me, do you honestly believe that I would allow you to go after them?" Itachi said, "Vigilant, so you are Genryu Sai Shigekuni Yamamoto. I must say, you are the only man I have known to be able to locate Zetsu." "Zetsu?" Shigekuni replied, "So that was that spy that was hiding in the building?" He cracked a grin. "He should be grateful I was a bit distracted by something. That was the only reason he was able to even come back to you alive." "You seem confident that you could kill him." Itachi shook his head, furrowing his brows. "No, my words were a little improper. A ninja is always confident in his abilities, but you seem far too confident." Although Yamamoto's eyes remained icy, he was interested in what the Uchiha was attempting to convey. "Oh," he responded, "and why do you think I'm too confident?" Itachi glared icily at the man with the black hair in front of him as two kunai dropped from his sleeve. There was no question in his mind that he was strong. "Do you honestly believe that you can take on two S-class ninja by yourself?" However, this was going too far. However, it made no difference. Leader Sama wanted this man to stop, and it was his responsibility to do so. "You even sent away your backup. This fight between us will not last long, and when it's over, you will be the one not walking away from this." "Backup?" Yamamoto did not know the words. "I need backup?" he said, lowering his head slightly and staring at the Uchiha in front of him with a fierce, homicidal gaze. "I am here, that is all the backup I need." On instinct, Itachi ducked, and a strong wave of lightning that seemed to be traveling at crazy speeds nearly destroyed the right side of his body. He tossed the two kunai in his hands and swore a little. In an amazing show of speed, the two kunai went ahead of them, but as they approached the motionless black-haired Shinigami, they appeared to slow down. When he saw the kunai he threw turned to ashes, the Sharingan wielder's eyes widened, which was unusual for him. It should be impossible what he saw. However, the obvious was pointed at him. Impressive, Itachi said, his eyes adopting the less severe look for which he was renowned. You seem to have a chakra affinity greater than even a Uchiha. Yamamoto said, my power has nothing to do with a chakra affinity, in a chilly manner. But it means nothing. It won't be long before your entire existence has been erased from this plane. In a recognizable voice, the words, Suiden, Daikoden no Jutsu, water release, great shark bullet technique were announced. As if it were merely a nuisance, Shigekuni backhanded the big shark made of pure water by swinging his right arm to his side. As he looks at the heavily bleeding Hoshigaki Kisame, who is glaring at him with a murderous expression on his face, he turns his head to the side with a frustrated expression. Although the black-haired Shinigami was aware that he was still alive, he believed the idiot would have been wise enough to wait for his turn or, at the very least, use this opportunity to flee and preserve his remaining life. Even though he didn't seem to understand that it was only a pointless attempt on his part to live a little longer, he stood in front of him with a look on his face that begged him to keep fighting. He still appeared to be able to stand despite the fact that the only on the left side of his stomach was big and ran through his entire body. A little impressed, Yamamoto said. He turned slightly and asked, you're still alive? Well, it seems I need to put more power into my strikes than I thought. Itachi glanced at his partner while mentally groaning at the enormous hole on his left side. He questioned, can you still fight Kisame? The man with the blue shark hair grinned and wiped the blood off his lip, saying, don't worry about me, Itachi. He knew he had to give Samahata time to recover, despite his tough exterior at the moment. His cloak was also destroyed, revealing the clothing he wore when he was still a shinobi of Kirigakure. He just took me by surprise. I didn't think he could cause that much damage by just thrusting his katana into my chest. Yamamoto turned to the tall man a few yards away and said, I'm getting bored of your water techniques. Do you have anything else to show me before you die? Make it an effort that will give me the impression that you want your life. The blood-30 grin on Kisami's face vanished as he scowled. He knew this man couldn't be doing what he believed, so he asked, what do you mean by that? Are you going to allow me to use my most powerful jutsu? With no fear in his voice, Yamamoto said, yes. His eyes remained fixed on his. Now give me your best shot, boy. At this, Kisame smiled ominously, sensing that Samahata had completed dressing the wound on his chest. As his body started to change into the shape he loved most, he remarked, you really are arrogant. He laughed darkly, his teeth jiggered as his body grew bigger and stronger. Do you think that just because you were able to land just one blow that I would die so easily? That you would walk away as the victor, he said. No matter, I'm going to enjoy ripping you apart. At this, the black-haired Shinigami furrowed his brows and gazed curiously at the ninja who had changed in front of him. Kisame had changed in some way. He now had the appearance of a man who had completely transformed into a shark. He appeared to have fully merged with his sword, and as a result, he began to resemble a shark, developing fins and webbed hands that appeared to enable him to move through water with remarkable ease. The former Sutecho thought he was fighting a hollow instead of a ninja because of the way he had changed in this way. This caused his eyes to narrow even more. Apparently, his king was correct to want them dead. Kisame flexed his now clawed hands and stood tall, wearing a dark smile. He inquired, you like? This is the form I can take when I fuse with my sword, Samahata. Darkly, and without moving from his position, Yamamoto said, stop talking. Now, like I said before, give me your best shot, boy. Despite his dark glare, Kisame slammed his hands together and collected a lot of chakra from Samahata and inside his body. Get some cover, Itachi. He said, his mouth moving into that recognizable dark grin. After giving a nod, Itachi leapt far enough away onto a sizable hill to observe the battle below. Seeing what was going to happen was kind of interesting. He had never seen Kisame fuse with Samahata frequently, and only when the enemy was strong enough to force him to do so. However, this time was different. Kisame believed the black-haired samurai would soon regret allowing him to use his most potent technique because the enemy had given him the time to do so. Kisame felt his chakra was ready to be released and smiled as he turned back to face the two adversaries. He withdrew slightly, his whole chest compressing out like a gigantic balloon about to burst. Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, this is something that you asked for. Just don't beg for mercy when you are being devoured by sharks. Sweden. Daibakusu Shoha. Water release. Great exploding water colliding wave. It appeared as though a gigantic vase ocean was in front of Yamamoto as the entire area in front of him burst into flames. But as he gazed at the massive tidal wavia which was larger than even a mountain, his eyes continued to narrow into slits, seemingly unflinching. Kisame was standing atop the mountainside ocean of water, looking down on Yamamoto as if he were an ant and laughing ominously. Before slamming his hands down on the sea of water, he raised them once more and went through additional hand seals. A few seconds later, a group of what appeared to be thousands of water-based sharks charged forward, all intent on consuming the man in front of them. The changed ninja let out a loud laugh and exclaimed, "Sweden. Senshokuko, water release. 1,000 feeding sharks, now die." Yamamoto raised his left foot slightly and narrowed his eyes at the vast group of water sharks that were coming straight at him. "Impressive," he said, stroking his Zanpakuto with his right hand. "But it is nothing that I can handle. You are nothing more than a beast. A thing that likes nothing more than to kill, even if that person doesn't have any way to fight you back." Kisame chuckled and made fun of him by saying, "It seems you do know something about me." Yamamoto said somberly, taking his Zanpakuto out of its sheath and slamming it down. "Hitotsume. Nadajiri, the first. Killing stroke." Everything happened in a flash, and Itachi's eyes widened in total surprise at what he saw from where he stood. A powerful sword strike appeared to split the massive mountain-sized mass of water in half, causing it to explode into two halves. Kisami's body split in half down the middle as he fell a few moments later. Itachi could see Kisami's look of shock even from this distance. He was convinced by what he had just witnessed that this man was, in fact, more powerful than anything he had ever seen. He had to get rid of him, and as much as he hated to use it, he knew it might be the only thing that would allow him to survive this battle. A few yards from the now verified power samurai in front of him, he materialized in a cloud of smoke using shunshin. His tone was dark and solemn. "There's no mistaking it now," he said. "You are indeed powerful, far more powerful than I had realized." Yamamoto looked at the young man in front of him and straightened up, sheathing the seal Ryujin Jaka. "So it seems you finally want to fight for your life," he said. He paused for a moment and glanced behind him, seeing Kisami's form move slightly. "No matter, you will be dead just like your partner is now. Impressive, even when being split in half you still have the will to move." With an angry expression on his face, half of Kisame turned and rushed in the direction of Yamamoto's bare back. "RRGGGGHHH," he snapped. The dark, murderous slits in Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto's eyes narrowed. His tone darkened even further as he said, "Hoshigaki Kisame, member of the organization Akatsuki. By order of the Soul King, you are here by sentence. To complete annihilation." He then grabbed his Zanpakuto and swung. When the man released his sword, the black-haired shinobi's eyes widened at the sheer volume of flames that seemed to emanate from it. The flame wave appears to be even taller than the water wave Kisame had produced. Itachi's eyes suddenly shifted, and he braced himself as a strong wave of flames appeared to cover his entire body. The flames vanished a few seconds later, revealing Yamamoto's figure standing where he had been. His hands were clenched around Ryujin Jaka, and his eyes were narrowed. Only a tiny portion of his mission had been accomplished. Hoshigaki Kisame had vanished. He had burned Kisami's soul as well as his body to ashes, just as his king had instructed him to do before bringing him into this world. Yamamoto sneered, believing that the victim he had just dispatched was worthless, a piece of dirt that wasn't even worthy of the joy that his Zanpakuto brought him. The big, humanoid figure that appeared above him caused him to raise an eyebrow in interest as he turned to face Itachi. "Oh," exclaimed Yamamoto, somewhat impressed by the spiritual pressure oozing from the body of the humanoid figure. "And what is this, I might ask?" Itachi yelled, "Susanoo," literally meaning, "he with the ability to help by all means," as his gaze shifted to the Mangekyo Sharingan's form. From what Yamamoto could see, the yellow figure above him appeared humanoid. It appeared to be fully formed, a typical face framed by what appeared to be hair strands. Itachi's Susanoo only had one peculiarity, a chin appendage that resembled a pharaoh's fake beard. The secondary arms appear when needed. It had two sets of arms that were joined at the elbow. A moment later, the beast was completely encased in armor, resembling a long-nosed tengu wearing magatama earrings. Yamamoto remarked, "You seem to have finally taken this fight seriously," as a small, dark smirk came to his face. The katana in his hands exploded into a massive amount of flames, engulfing the entire area like a second sun that threatened to destroy the dimension surrounding them. "Then, to not be rude, I must do the same as well." Yamamoto's eyes narrowed as he uttered the words, "Reduce all creation to ash," observing Itachi's widening, nearly fearful expression, which was completely different from what was visible on his face. Ryujin Jaka, flowing blade. Like flame.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.